Good morning. Call this workshop to order today. Would you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a couple cards for public input. Kim Cronin, followed by Mr. Stuart Klatt.
Good morning, Superintendent and board members. I'm glad to see that we're looking into care here today. I've been having questions about this whole thing for several years. Back before care here was here, SEIU and the teachers union were strong in having the district open up these clinics to help save money in health insurance costs. 1 year, insurance didn't go up. That was it. There's a lot of things that I'm questioning with care here. We had an issue with CPAP machines. It seems like everybody today has sleep apnea, with bus drivers especially. Seems like these employees have to go for tests every year when the machine should keep a record of what's going on and if they're using it. But it doesn't seem like anybody's monitoring this. I've got questions on occupational usage there. The new blood testing that we're doing there, fit for duty that we're doing there, and that money's being taken out and put in there instead of being in the insurance fund itself. This is supposed to be just for insurance fund. It's great that the district can use it to save money, but there's a lot of things that I've got questions on. It seems like a lot of times people are sent over and over again for different tests. Sometimes tests come out to, things are wrong. But, is this making our claims go up higher? Employees aren't paying anything. So I've got a lot of questions. I'm hoping to hear some answers today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Stewart?
Well, good morning. Today's the day before legislature. Aren't we excited? 61 of 67 counties are doing some type of demonstration, job action. Lake County, some are doing walk-ins, walk-outs, sign waving, wear red for ed. With the whole line, and then we did a major ad buy on Fund Our Future. Now, we must be having some effect because the Koch brothers are starting a 7-figure ad buy today, pushing school choice or vouchers. Now, it seems like the legislature, last time they had the school choice slash vouchers, voted against it. But it's rearing its ugly head again. So FEA is looking at, of course, local control of schools, returning it back, more money for public education with local control, less testing, and then things that we can do to retain and recruit teachers. Even the DOE says that we will have over 10,000 openings next year at the beginning of the school system, or beginning of school. So that means the emphasis on retaining and recruiting teachers in our classrooms is going to be paramount. And we all have a role to play in that as well. So as you talk to legislators, let them know that we need to fund our future. We need local control of our schools. We don't need voucher schemes to take money away from public schools. And that we need to recruit and retain our teachers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving on with the agenda at 3.01, Altoona Charter School. Summerlin.
Before Ms. Summerlin begins, I want to welcome Schmidt as well as the board of Altoona Charter. Thank you for joining us this morning. Their Altoona Charter has submitted their application for renewal of their charter, and as part of that process, our district site committee went out. They've done a site review as well as a review of their finances, and so today, as we typically do, we bring to you in this workshop the findings of that committee, and we welcome them here as we at the conclusion, any questions that you all have, we can direct to their board. And so we've set you up front so we could have some facilitative conversation. If y'all have any questions or comments after you've heard the report, we would welcome you as well to be a part of that discussion this morning. Today, we're not making any recommendations. The committee will have a final recommendation. I'll consider this information as well as feedback from the board and from you as well before bringing a recommendation to the board in regards to the renewal of your charter application. So we're going to turn it over to Ms. Summerlin to hear the findings of the review committee.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Gamble, board members, superintendent, and Mr. Johnson. As Ms. Cornegie mentioned, we are at the process now because their contract is due to be renewed on June 30th of this year. This is in Florida statute addresses that a charter may be renewed provided that the program review demonstrates that they have successfully accomplished their goals and that none of the grounds for non-renewable is established by paragraph 8A. 8A says causes for non-renewal or termination, that the sponsor shall make student achievement for all students the most important factor when determining whether to renew or terminate the charter. The sponsor may also choose not to renew or terminate the charter if the sponsor finds that one of the grounds set forth below exists: failure to participate in the state's education accountability system, failure to meet generally accepted standards of fiscal management, material violation of law, or other good cause. As Ms. Cornegie mentioned, we've been going through this process since last fall. On October 1st, Mr. Schmidt and I discussed the overall timeline and the focus of the program review. As Ms. Cornegie mentioned, we've had ongoing and progressive site visits. The contract renewal application was provided to the school the 1st of November, and it was due January 30th, and it was received on time. Last 3 weeks, the Charter Review Committee has had the application had reviewed, and then last Thursday, they met to determine the recommendation to the superintendent. And then today, obviously, we're having the board workshop. These are the Charter Review Committee members, the positions that they hold in the district. This is a list of them. Many of them are in the audience, so if you had specific questions in their area of expertise, they would be here to address that. There were 3 documents that were loaded in board docs. The first one was the charter renewal report for Altoona School, and this was a district-generated report consisting of 3 main areas: the general compliance information, school performance data, and the evaluation instrument. Because this is a renewal, we have some history that we share and we keep up with. So the first area was under the annual compliance review findings. So the last 5 years, there have been various findings under compliance. I do need to note that under 1314, the fingerprinting situation did occur, and that board member later did get their fingerprinting done. And then again, in the school year 16-17, the fingerprinting did lapse for a board member, and that board member did eventually resign. So those are the non-compliance areas that we had. And then at the bottom is the contract renewal. So you'll see that in 2004 was the original contract. The next section under school performance data, that information was generated from our accountability and testing accountability area. related to school grades. They broke it down by subgroup. They did a great job comparing other schools in the area. They looked at Eustis, Umatilla, and Seminole Springs. They gave us information on retention rates, discipline, and attendance. And the last two items are actually non-applicable in this area. This is an instrument that we will use continually from now on. The last part is evaluation instrument for the review committee. And so in this, during this review, there were three core indicators: the educational performance, the financial performance, and the organizational performance. And under each one, we had 2 or 3 focus areas that we looked at. So, for example, under state accountability, under educational performance, we had the state accountability and the education program implementation. So we will look at those individually as we go through here. And you will see this again at the end of my presentation, the overall assessment from the committee. So this was all a district-generated report. The school generated the report labeled the Altoona Charter Renewal Application. And again, this was an application process that was put in place this year. The Charter Renewal Application was developed as a mechanism for the leadership team and the governing board to fulfill the Florida statute during the renewal process. The narrative portions were critical parts of the formative submission to the sponsor, and the directions provided stated that they should be comprehensive descriptions of the charter school's progress over the course of the current contract term and its plans for the renewal charter contract item. There was other important information that was required, and that was to be presented by completing the various templates that were in the application. So again, the 3 core indicators are educational, organizational, and financial. The ratings, there's 3 ratings. Meets the standards, and the response reflects a thorough understanding of the key issues and demonstrates capacity to continue to operate a quality charter school. Under approaches the standard, the response addresses most of the criteria, but the responses lack some meaningful detail and may require important additional information. And lastly, does not meet the standard. The response lacks meaningful detail, demonstrates lack of preparation, or otherwise raises substantial concern about the applicant's understanding of the issue or in concepts or ability. So those are the ratings that we will look at. Under educational performance, the first area was the focus area of state accountability. Under the strengths that the committee recognized was the number of students tested. I believe they had tested 99%, which is outstanding. And their ELA has increased and low as 25% for the last 3 years. The concerns they cited was the decline in the math learning gain scores. School year 2017, they had 51, 2018, 48. There's a significant decline in the science scores from 2017 to 46 and last year to 31. In 4th grade mathematics, only 20% of the low as 25% made learning gains. In 5th grade, the ELA, only 33% of the low as 25% made learning gains. And compared to schools in the geographical comparison, Altoona generally underperformed those schools such as Umatilla, Eustis, and Seminole Springs. And it was generally, there were a couple areas that they did excel. And I'm not sure if I mentioned, the committee felt that the rating here approaches the standard. Under the second focus area under educational performance, the concerns were the 90-minute uninterrupted reading block required by statute was not implemented at the time of visit. I will note that that has been corrected. It has not been verified, but we've been notified that that information was provided on a sheet of paper and was correct in Skyward. The modified reading plan was submitted after the visit. However, the plan lacks meaningful detail, and I've outlined the 3 statutes that discusses that in statute that the reading plan is very important. When we went on the site visit, the leadership team had completed the application and had acknowledged that they were adding reading materials to that. So the day of the visit, we asked about that, and they did say that previously they had adopted the district's reading plan, but now they've added to it, so that's why we asked for to resubmit the reading plan. because that would be some information we would need from years on when we go on campus annually to do our monitoring.
Will we see a copy of that modified plan before we?
We can, yes. Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Parental notification letter was with information regarding the reading at grade level and gains of years worth of learning for every year spent in the charter school. We did not see that information. Still under educational program implementation, the strength regarding the program offered for students with disabilities is appropriate and meets their individual needs. There was a concern mentioned of the uncertainty of a plan for addressing the achievement of the students with disabilities on the FSA ELA. 32% scored satisfactory in school year 2017, and 19% scored satisfactory in school year 2018.
Do we know the number of students with disabilities in those tested grade levels that we're talking about?
I would have to either refer to probably the school. I think we talked about that in the meeting. I know Ms. Hart is in the room.
The overall percentage is 18.
You don't know how many students that is equivalent to? Okay.
Right, because if you've only got a handful of
Right,
students,
that's what I was
then
trying to
that
figure out.
percentage might seem inflated, I guess, right?
That's what I was asking.
The revised five-year plan submitted, leadership at Altoona had provided an update on that. There were still some areas that lacked specifics and possibly appropriate growth achievement goals. So at this point, this slide represents items that we felt were either non-responsive or non-compliant items. So at the end, you'll see that we would like some further information. So the modified reading plan, as I had mentioned, lacks details regarding, and so the question still outstanding is, what is the school's professional development plan related to the reading instruction? How are reading plan funds allocated? And the STAR progress monitoring data not provided, so evidence of effective remedial instruction for students below grade level could not be determined.
Do they have the STAR program and didn't give you the data, or do they not have the data?
They have the STAR program. That's one of their progress monitoring tools.
Do they
We
have the
didn't-
data? Did they?
I thought we submitted it, but
Okay.
we have it there anytime we want it.
Is that the only point of progress monitoring, STAR, or do they use anything else?
We do not have access to iStation, iReady, or any of those.
Okay. All right.
Evidence of parental notification regarding if their child is reading at grade level and whether child gains at least a year's worth of learning for every year. And again, that was not submitted. And both of those items were under the curriculum instruction and assessment area. Under the my department, revised five-year plan should be reevaluated to address the appropriateness of goals. Under the organizational performance, there were no comments. The committee felt, under the focus area of student enrollment and conduct, the rating met the standard. There were no comments made individually on their strengths. The concern was that their enrollment form did not include the mental health language per the new statute 1006.07.
That has since been updated.
Okay. Student enrollment and conduct, again, these would be the non-responsive or the non-compliant items. This falls under student services, the updated student registration form with the mental health question. Under the focus area of governance, staff, and parents, the rating approaches the standard. Under strength, there were no comments. Under concerns, the suicidal prevention training was not provided to staff per statute. The lack of evidence of parental notification of out-of-field teachers per statute. Non-certified art teachers as the teacher of record for art per statute. And the volunteer policy and process does not fulfill statute.
Julie, these are, I mean,
Go ahead.
these are one of the things that are somewhat of a big deal for us if we are in non-compliance. How,
And
like,
it is-
what
there
happens?
are charters have some leeway, but there are certain requirements that they still have to do. They're public school teachers. The notification, as I understand it, and the experts are in the room, and so Michelle's here and Mr. Farnsworth is here, so they can address those. But the volunteer policy, that's,
If there's anything that was lacking in the notification, it's not record.
Can you come up?
Yeah,
Notification being sent out.
any comments, they need to be on the record, and so if you'll go to the podium where there's a microphone so we could capture that and repeat that, please.
Could I ask something? Is it possible, I don't know who you are, I'm Bill Mathias.
Walter Schmidt.
And are you the administrator?
Yes, sir.
Could he sit right there in case we have questions, rather than
If
this?
you're comfortable with that, absolutely.
Yeah, because I've got some things when we get done.
Okay.
would
For-
you, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to address the lack of parent notification of out-of-field teachers per statute, the letter was sent out. We do not have a signature page or a checkoff sheet that says we sent them out. The letters did get sent out because that it has to be done. And so we've done it not only for that, but also for Title I that has to be done. So if there's anything that's lacking, it's a lack of a paper trail. I'm not going to lie and produce something after the fact that shows that I did something when I didn't do it at the moment. So, you know, that's basically my comment on the parent-teacher notification. As for the volunteer policy and process not fill statute, we actually do send our, and this was not known by Human Resources, we do send our volunteers for Level 2 screening to Lake County schools, and they were fingerprinted and we pay for it. When that was questioned to me, they did not know that, and then I assured them that they had been, because we access online, we pay the $74 with our school credit card, and we do the printing. So it gets done. I think this all kind of falls back on, and I don't mean to hijack your thing, Julie, I apologize, but this really has to do with communication between the district and the charter schools. We're going to be compliant whenever we can. Some of these issues that were asked for compliance were asked for me a couple days beforehand or a week beforehand. And, I mean, for 10 years we've been on an island. All right, there has been no real interaction between us and the district. Not that we haven't tried. The regional director came out and he asked if we gave the FSAs. That shows me a lack of understanding of charter schools and a lack of interest. So we will do whatever we can to be in compliance and make sure we do what we need to do, but there needs to be, I believe, a better level of communication between the district, not just at renewal time either, through the entire process. I mean, when Ms. Cornegie got into a position, I emailed her because I heard that she was visiting schools. We were not on that list. We were not visited, and there was no reply to my email. And I'm not here to point fingers, and I'm not trying to deflect, but I want the school to do good. But I need information from the district as much as you need information from me.
Have you attended when the charter schools have met with the superintendent?
Yes, the
Have you been
quarterly
part of
meetings,
that?
yes, I have, every single one. But
And that was one of the questions I wrote down is, I know you said the site visits, do the site visits only happen in charter renewal, or do they happen?
No, this year, and this is a new thing,
Okay.
that information was presented to the charters in November, I think. We finalized the document, so they had that prior. And Mr. Schmidt and I had talked about the fact that that was still going to be part of the renewal process, that was on-site visit. But we have now visited every charter school.
Okay.
Different members that are here today, and then sometimes, because it would be so overwhelming to take the whole group, some have elected to go at different times. HR was one of those, because there's only one of him, and he can't be with all of us at the same time. So yes,
It's
that
a fairly
is
new, I mean, we just put this department in
Yes,
charge
ma'am.
of this. So since you've been there, that's when we've started to do these site visits.
Yes, we started in the fall. I
Okay.
mean, we started the process in the fall. We've done the site visits in January and February. As to the volunteer policy and process, I know that there's some back and forth on that. I don't know at this point if you want experts in the field, either Mr. Farnsworth or Ms. Hoppenstedt, to come up and address that, or just go ahead and continue. Continue?
What do you want to do? Continue.
Okay. So now I'm under organizational performance, and I think we, further than that, I went back and made a note, I'm sorry. Okay, this is where I am. Suicidal prevention training not provided. And I think that was one thing that we had talked about, was discussed at the site visit, and we have not received evidence that that has occurred.
Wednesday.
Okay. So we did do this slide. Sorry, catching back up. Still under governance, staff and parents approaches the standard, the renewal application. These were just comments, like the renewal application inaccurately stated 30% of the teachers are rated highly effective. As reported from the school, no teacher or administrators with a highly effective rating during school year 2018. The expert in our area went back. Yes. And the overall comment in this area was the governance structure is of concern as it relates to the financial success of the school. So moving forward, we would like to see, and Mr. Schmidt just shared that Wednesday they'll be doing the suicide prevention training. The human resources issue is the method or the policy that the governing board and school leadership use to address unsatisfactory leadership, teacher or staff performance, as well as leadership or teacher turnover. Evidence that the parents of all students in the out-of-field, teachers, classes were notified in writing of the assignment, and then again the volunteer policy and volunteer policy and evidence that all volunteers will have background checks run before scheduled to volunteer, both level 1 and level 2. Under facilities, the committee rated them, it meets the standard. There is a lack of a transportation plan. I know there's been some communication with Mr. Fender. When I checked with him on Thursday or Friday, he had not yet received it.
I submitted the transportation plan 2 days before the Thursday meeting, and the gentleman whose name you gave me, it doesn't come into mind, said that it was fine.
Mr. Fender?
Yeah, I believe it was Fender, PF?
Yes, that's Fender. Okay. Oh, sorry. So again, this would be the non-responsive or non-compliant items. The next section is under the financial performance. The rating here, under financial management, focus area was does not meet the standard. The concerns are stated as does not meet the financial records in accordance with accounts and codes prescribed by the financial and program cost accounting and reporting of Florida schools, as reported in their fiscal year end 2017 and 2018 financial audit, and it identifies the statute, and also does not properly maintain an operating budget. And again, that outlines the statute. Under the area of financial viability, the rating was does not meet the standard. The concern is declining fund balance over the last 4 years. 2018 fiscal year end undesignated fund balance at 0.62% of revenues. School year 2017, the fiscal year end undesignated fund was negative $18,129. The annual budget significantly overspent for the last 5 years. Continued short-term borrowing as the actual expenditures exceeded the budgeted expenditures for 2014 through 2018, and short-term financing extended annually without significant repayment.
Excuse me. Are we going to go all the way through it and then come back, or?
Doesn't matter to me, you can ask me.
If it's necessary at some point in the future to recreate this decision, or whatever decision you ultimately make, I think it'd be a lot easier if Ms. Summerlin went through her materials, answered questions from the board, and then Mr. Schmidt be given an opportunity to address at any points that he might have, and you then have an opportunity to ask him questions as he went through that.
Mr. Schmidt, if you'll circle that one, because I'm going to come back.
Yes, sir, no problem.
Okay.
So on the non-responsive or non-compliant items, there were 2 communications with the leadership team at Altoona. The first one was additional questions for Altoona. At that time, the school provided corrected monthly financial statements beginning with July 1st, 2017, and the monthly financial statements did not meet required standards, and also did not address the questions regarding the line of credit. There was a second communication that was amended, financial assurance paper, and it was received with amended copy with answers and signatures. So at the end, the Charter Review Committee, after the discussion, completed their own evaluation, and then we did a vote. So again, you've seen this instrument at the very beginning. Under state accountability and educational program implementation, overall, the committee felt that it approaches the standard. Under the financial performance, in both indicators, focus areas, they said, does not meet the standard. And under operational performance, the student enrollment, student enrollment and conduct and facilities met the standard. Under governance, staff, and parents, they felt like they'd approached the standard. So the committee's recommendation is that to the superintendent is for the approval of the renewal with serious concerns. The committee felt that while the school is meeting or close to meeting the educational organizational performance standards, there are grave and serious concerns with financial status and viability of the school, as well as important information in other areas that seems incomplete or inconclusive. Also, before the renewal application has been school board approved, the committee felt that the items indicated as non-responsive or non-compliant shall be submitted. That's my presentation.
All right. Bill?
Can you speak to the financial viability?
Yes, sir. Well, as you know, we're a very small school. We have 307 kids, which is our highest attendance at this point in time. Financially, as you know, number of kids dictates how much money you get, and it's a balancing act of having the appropriate amount of teachers, teachers' aides to have for the comparability report and everything else you have to do for the district. Costs exceed, or become more every year, and the amount of kids, I can't have 19, 20, 21 kids in a kindergarten classroom. So we have a full staff. Our fund balance this year is projected to be very good. Some of the other things that are pointed on here, like short-term financing extended without significant repayment, we have a LOC to retain liquidity because, as you all know, we do not get the money for our new students until January. So let's say you have a school of 300 kids running on a budget of 275. That's a hard pull to go for half a year without having that new funding. You've had to hire new teachers, new aides. That LOC looks to be repaid by August, since we have such a high enrollment this year.
What is your enrollment, excuse me?
307. When I started out 10 years ago, it was 134. We have purchased 2 brand new buses, which has, yes, you have to pay financing on a bus, but the amount of repairs, we have to have decent transportation for our kids. And we also have a contract with Unitil Elementary School that they prepare our school lunches, so we also have a vehicle that has to go get those. So that's the money that we owe. When it comes to the stuff regarding the Red Book, we've had the same report twice in the past 2 years. This is correct. This is the first, we have submitted the same answer to the report twice. This is the first time it's been questioned that I know of. I can look through my emails and state that I've not been questioned about it except this year, which is fine. Mr. Ward has given my name to an old colleague of his that used to work in Alachua County. He owns a business now that deals with charter school finance, and I have a meeting with him on March 12th regarding either helping our current accountant or changing accountants altogether, which would address, according to Mr. Ward, that would address many of his concerns. I mean, it doesn't make them disappear, but at least we're making the necessary changes. Any more specific questions about finance?
Yeah. Does your board have a set fund balance as a percentage of revenue?
We try to keep, our goal is to be at the state minimum, which is 3%. We seem to be more than that most of the time. We're a 501c3. What money we get, we put back into the teachers, the school, the equipment. We have to pay for it all. So in many ways, it's like running a small business. There's trade-offs that you have to deal with.
And when we look at a small business, and years ago I looked at what was the number that one would need to be self-sustaining,
Yes, sir.
and it was 600. So you're woefully short of that number to be self-sustaining.
Yes, sir.
And it appears to me, because we had a more detailed report from our CFO, that you kind of are living on borrowed time. So what's the plan to sort that out? I mean, do you have even the capacity to get to a 600? Because it's a really small campus.
Our current capacity is set at 3, it was just changed by the district to 376, if I'm not mistaken. That's with the current buildings we have there now. There is plenty of property to add more, so we would have the capacity. We'd have to deal with some of the infrastructure of electricity and water. Whether or not, the community probably could support up to that. But that is, I have not entertained the thought of going to 600 students. But,
But the numbers kind of tell you what you need to do to get to
Yes, sir.
that stability that I'm looking for.
Yes, sir.
Right.
So what is the plan? If your plan is not to increase your FTE, how do you decrease your costs? Because it has to be one or the other, right?
Yeah, well, some of our costs are going to age out, as in LOC and financing of buses. You're trying to hit a sweet spot, as Mr. Mathias says. The sweet spot is probably higher than what we're in the range of right now. We're able to pay all our bills. We're able to pay all our teachers. I guess what I'm asking is, what are you looking for us to do?
Well, for me, at least one part of that financial picture is this line of credit, and help me understand that a little bit more. So how much balance do you have currently outstanding?
I do not have it at the top of my head.
I was trying to verify. So I think the numbers we have from Mr. Ward indicate about $61,000. Right? And your budget shows $3,600 repaid in next fiscal year and $3,600 repaid in the following fiscal year. But you think you're going to have it all done by August?
Well,
that's only $7,200. So where's the rest? When's that occurring?
Well, we get 2 checks a month from the district. State sends you the funds, you take 5% off the top, and then we get the remainder. And our increase in funding for our new FTE, February, which is actually not 307, but 302, I believe, has increased our monthly income by $20,000. So, at least, between $20,000 and $24,000. So with those numbers, based upon the concern of the board and finance, we would pay off the LOC in that period of time, between now and August.
But would you use some of those?
I don't understand.
Some of those
$20,000
dollars to pay for the teachers, the new teachers, like you said, you can't have a kindergarten
Yeah,
class in 19.
we were able to maintain the teachers we have. We weren't necessarily dipping into existing funds. We were able to pay with what we did have.
This is extra.
Well, as much as extra can be in education.
I'm sorry, wait. I thought the LOC was I thought you had like a $60,000 balance.
Yes.
And $20,000 isn't going to pay off $60,000.
Well,
So
I'm getting
confused.
$20,000 a month extra
Oh,
every
a
month.
Okay.
Between now and the new fiscal year and including into the new fiscal year.
Okay.
And this renewal is for how long, a period of time?
It's typically a
5
5-year
years.
renewal.
Is it possible to renew for less than that? Okay, thank you.
Well, and if I
Because there's
could
pretty
ask-
significant concerns here.
Would it be
particularly-
helpful for Mr. Ward to give
Yes.
some further information in regards to the finances, and might
Right.
help the board, if that's all right, Mr. Chair?
Good morning.
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 So as Mr. Schmidt was talking, they have some concerns, obviously, with dealing with money. I've looked at charter school models before, and I've seen charter schools models run with 200 kids. So 300 kids is definitely something doable. Now, I will say that they're running transportation, and we know that funding for transportation is short, so that might be a difficulty for them. The biggest concern that I had when reviewing this is the lack of good information that's being provided to their board as far as their financial statements, their monthly financial statements, and their audits. Their audits had significant budgetary balances, negative budgetary balances, and to me, that's key. In a situation where you're having real low financial success, the last thing you want is poor planning or poor budgeting in this process. So that's something that's definitely, they need a lot of assistance on. And then the other is they're not using the Red Book, the Florida Red Book. They're not using fund accounting. Key with governmental fund accounting is you have your operating fund, your capital fund, and your federal fund. They're receiving Title I funds this year, so they're restricted, and they should be shown in a separate fund, so should their capital. So it kind of gives the users of the financial statements a clearer picture as to what they should be looking at when they shouldn't. The current structure that they're reporting combines all funds together. It also includes their fixed assets and their short-term liabilities or their long-term liabilities. Since they're only borrowing the line of credit for the 2 buses, and I think now a van too, they have a school building that's their biggest asset. So it overinflates their fund balance when you look at that sheet. So it looks like they got $750,000 as a fund balance approximately, but reality is it's much less than that.
Is there, when the district forever ago gave you guys the school, is there any debt on the school, on the facility?
No, we lease it from the district. There is no giving.
How much is the lease?
It's extremely small. It's just a token. I don't know the number offhand, but the lease is.
Is that in your budget?
So we don't do maintenance on it either then? You cover maintenance?
We cover all maintenance. The only thing that the district comes in and does when it comes to maintenance is they maintain our water. We have a water chlorinating thing on our facility. Facility makes it sound big. It's a room. And then when it comes to safety inspections, fire inspections, that we contract the district out to do that. But anything else, any kind of maintenance done on the building, any maintenance done on the portables, grounds, is all per the charter school.
So we actually own the building and the grounds?
You own the land that it's on. You own the large schoolhouse that's there that we renovated, that Altoona School renovated through a community block enhancement grant a few years ago. And you own 4 old portables. All the other William Scotsman type portables, we did a lease purchase on, and we own them outright. So what we stand on, you own, and the big building you own, and that's about it.
Do we have any idea what that token lease is? Is it $1 or is it?
Yeah, I think it's like $1.
$1, okay.
I mean, I've never seen it, and when I walked in on the job 10 years ago, it was told that we were leasing it, but I'm not sure what you guys are going to be leasing the ones that are converting into regular charters at. So
I have seen it, and I think it is $1.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I
I was trying to
couldn't
work
find
the
it in the
numbers.
budget.
If you don't have any rent, I guess you can make it on 200 kids. I was trying to get back to your comment. And the numbers weren't adding up until the part where you don't have to pay anything.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
What about, do we have any more finance questions?
This is obviously the biggest concern to me because you can begin to see when the resources aren't there, just like our county being 58th in funding, and so we struggle to make things work for our kids, that when you don't have the resources, then that also then plays a direct correlation into not being able to get the student progression that we're looking for.
I understand.
So it's a huge concern for me.
And then on the flip side of that, I guess my questions kind of stem around the academic side. I don't know if we're ready to transition to that, but
Yeah,
it's
some
hard to
questions
build your
about that,
numbers
too.
when you don't have enticing academic scores.
Somehow,
Right.
we've been able to do it.
Well,
Most of your students are from where?
Most of our students are from, they're zoned Spring Creek, Umatilla, Eustis Heights, Mount Dora. We have a percentage of kids that comes from Marion County. Our school is, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We get a lot of kids who have not been successful anywhere else, and that's why they've chosen to come to a charter school. And I do believe that does make our performance not look as good. And I look at the schools that we were compared to, I'd love to have those kids when it comes to academic performance. But that is not our population. Our population, they're wonderful people, extreme poverty, a lack of pride in student education, a lack of pride in doing anything for many of them, and we try to break that. So the kids we get are not the kids that Umatilla gets. They're not the kids that, what's the other one they compared us to?
Seminole Springs.
Not Seminole Spring kids.
So how do you overcome that? Because certainly we can't look at the demographic or look at these kids and use that as an excuse. And when 31% of them are being proficient in science, or
Yeah, well, science is a huge issue.
less than a quarter of the bottom quartile are making learning gains in math. When these kids matriculate, how are they going to succeed in the future if we don't give them a good foundation? That's my question. How are you overcoming that?
Well, you have to, I mean, when we get them, they're at some level, you know, and it's not the level that we would choose to have them come to us at. So we have to start at a place where they're at, and we build on them, and we keep on pushing them. When it comes to meeting their needs, we've invested highly in things like counseling for them. We've contracted out to have counseling for those kids who are products of trauma, abuse, bad living situations. I mean, we could talk forever about what we do. I'm not prepared to give you a per classroom rundown, but we do our very best every day to give those kids what they need.
But are you seeing student learning gains, though?
Not the way we would like to, no.
Right.
So what's the plan? Because I think it is fair to compare you to Seminole Springs. Well, maybe not, Spring Creek.
We're not compared to Spring Creek. I mean, not in the.
Your demographics aren't similar to Spring Creek out in Paisley?
There is some overlap, yes. But we're not, on the report, we're not compared to them.
Oh, I see.
And you're suggesting that the socioeconomic status of students at Umatilla and Seminole Springs is greater than Altoona?
I would make that. Or at least the interest in education is.
So you probably have some students in MTSS, right?
A number, yes.
What percentage of your population might be in Tier 3 or Tier 2? And
19% of our kids are ESE, then I would be willing to say we're in the, I mean, I don't know, I have not number off the top of my head, but we're in somewhere in the 20 percentile to 30 percentile range of kids in MTSS, and 2 or 3 at least or more. I can get that number if you guys request it. I can be more than happy to share that with you.
I think I'd be interested in looking at, I mean, that's certainly a segment of your population that, that'd be where you'd have some information on tracking whether or not these people are making gains and whether or not your interventions are working, right? So, I mean, if are you seeing that your interventions are working, or they're not working?
Yeah, I believe the interventions are working, yes.
So if they're working, then I guess I'm struggling to understand why that doesn't translate later. Why are we still seeing kids struggling significantly if the interventions are working? I guess I'd like to learn more about that.
Okay.
Was this made available to you before?
No.
It was on board docs, though, right? I would have just thought you would have come a little better prepared, because these are pretty significant concerns.
I was not made aware that it's on board docs. I had a brief conversation with Ms. Cornegie. If I did not get the gist of the information as I should have, then I take that responsibility.
I would like to include the number of ESE students. I think that can be significant. That number can be inflated for sure. And then did you say, I'm not sure who this question is directed to, but I know that somewhere in there the goals, the academic goals weren't, I mean, like I'm looking at it, it says the percentage of students showing growth on the FSA will increase 3 out of 5 years. So you're just looking for an increase, but there's not an identifiable increase. And then like it says for reading, as Altoona School will use a reading curriculum embedded 5 out of 5 years, but you don't specify, I mean, you're just saying you're using a reading curriculum, but if you're not looking at your instruction and if it's effective or if these interventions are effective, then these goals to me are general, and I'm not sure that you would see the improvement that you want to see if you're not really drilling down into what you're going to look for to show.
And I think that was commented on there, that we need to
I
be
think
more
so.
specific in our goals in the 5-year plan.
So that's something that's going to be submitted before we vote as well? Okay. And then, is this something, I know this is your department, I think, Julie, where we just started doing these site visits, and that was something I wrote down, because I thought if you come in with all this information that you're requesting, and this is the first you've requested it after 5 years, that would be kind of okay. But this is something that we're going to continue to monitor. I think this goes to Mr. Mathias's point that we renew for 5 years, but are we going to monitor for years to come?
Annually,
Will
yes,
we have
at
this
least
availability now?
I was not advocating for renewing for 5 years.
No, I know, but you were asking if we needed to renew for 5 years or if we could shorten the time. But my question is, how are we going to progress monitor these
We're
questions?
doing, yes, the game plan from now on is to do annual visits to all charters. And then, in my mind, what we would do is go out in the fall, and then if we see things that need to be cleaned up,
Right.
then
Then he
work
would
with
know.
them and then come back and check in the spring. You know, the monitoring tool was passed out to all the charter school principals in November. But to Mr. Schmidt's point, you know, we came and we reported what we saw.
Right. On some of the compliance pieces, I mean, it is a lot of compliance. We have a lot of just compliance pieces. So I think that would help get all that together, but.
And I think that the quarterly principals meetings will help communicate to the principals, like the Hope Scholarship comes to mind. You know, we let them know, by the way, you know, Hope Scholarship has happened, because sometimes, you know, I don't know how they find out necessarily if they go to, I mean, they have charter groups that meet, but the Hope Scholarship was for public schools.
Yeah.
They're a public school. So the November board meeting, charter meeting, you know, we shared the district's information, which is really the state's information. We just talked about our intake and all that. So those are the kind of pieces that hopefully we can share out early.
And for clarification, the monitoring tool did change significantly this year. I mean, Ms. Summerlin came out yearly for her entire tenure on the job. This year it went from 2 pages to 16, so there was a difference in it, as you say. So
Can you clarify, in your 5-year plan on your academic goals, like it says 70% of students will score 25% or above on STAR reading 3 out of 5 years? What is, like, I've seen STAR reading reports individually for my son, but I don't understand what score 25% or above means.
I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Yeah, I had the same question.
Right. Like, because, I mean, to me, that looks like a really low goal. I mean, if your goal is, what, 25% of your kids are going to read, or 70% of your kids are going to read 25%?
Right.
That looks really low, like you're,
Well, to be honest, I'm struggling with all these goals.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
I
they're
also
all pretty much the
kind of
same.
tuned into the growth 3 out of 5 years. So are you okay with declines 2 years?
Right.
I mean, is that a goal that you're okay with?
No.
So why is that your goal? I don't know why your goal wouldn't be that every year you need to see an increase, because, I mean, when compared to the other schools, you're struggling.
Yeah, your point's.
And you can't recruit people when you're struggling. And not to mention the academic disadvantage that these students potentially could be receiving by being in a struggling school.
I understand you loud and clear.
I mean, I think that they can recruit with, you know, I don't think people that, my nephew went to your school, and I don't think that people are necessarily looking directly at school grades when they're looking at Altoona
they're not.
Elementary
That's right.
specifically, but I do think they need to have a real concrete plan in place with real actionable goals, with real actionable progress to be
Well,
made.
to the point
and
of
that's
the-
my concern.
To the point of the committee, the goals will be more specific and redone.
And I would say that, I know you spoke about the element of the counseling and the services that you are providing outside of the educational realm, and I think that it would be advantageous in regards to the MTSS program, if that's what your concern is. It's not necessarily the kids can't learn, it's that there's so many barriers to learning, that should be indicated as such in your MTSS plan. So if you can sit in front of us and say only 31% of our kids are achieving because of this, this, and this, but this is what we're doing as a means to kind of combat their lifestyle and where they're coming from, that could be something that does quantify, it is measurable, that it's something that it's a service you're providing for those kids. And we do know that parents choose you. Your parents are there because they want to be at Altoona.
And I know that you take difficult students.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any requirements from coming to Altoona School. You don't have to have a 3.0 on the FSA. You don't have to live within a certain community. If we can pick them up or you can bring them here, they're welcome at Altoona School. And we have upped our services to the students as our students with needs have increased.
So just make that clear in what you're doing.
Sure.
And in your finances too, because
I think that's
that can be very cost,
Well,
addressing the needs of high needs children is costly.
expensive.
And I look forward to working with Mr. Ward and the gentleman that he's introduced me to shore up our financial issues.
Who is that person?
He's CFO and Lodge attorney before I was years ago.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, in answer to the earlier question, the statute seems to have a requirement that the initial application and term of charter be for 5 years, and it also has some provisions in it for awarding a 15-year renewal, but it doesn't say really anything in particular or demanding about the length of time in between those. So it would seem to be that on a renewal, at least when I read this morning, and I'll double check, but that there is possible to have a term for a charter for something different than 5.
Okay, good. Okay.
But you're going to study it?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to find anything different. I think ultimately, if we're going to look at it from a practical standpoint, as long as you have some cause to have it for a term of less than 5 years, I think that's what the issue would be.
And I think we have cause.
We'll have to decide that
At a
on
board
another
meeting.
day.
All right.
So what is the plan going forward? We'll see a modified renewal? Or is it going back to the committee, or what is the?
I would like to ask them to identify, correct, provide, like the transportation plan, he said, so, some of those will be easier. I think some of the bigger pieces would be the 5-year plan like we talked. He mentioned, Mr. Schmidt mentioned he's already corrected the application form. So I think some of those will be checks. Mr. Dodd wanted a copy of the reading plan. We can get that to you today.
I'd like information on the science.
We're voting on this when?
objectives.
When are we voting on this?
Well, I can put it on the agenda and make a recommendation, I guess I want to ask you all how long you think it would be before you could provide the necessary documentation that they're asking for, and just in fairness to you, to give you a little bit of time. That was kind of the purpose of today, to share with you what the concerns are and give you a chance to,
I mean, most of this stuff we can probably have in a couple of weeks, if that's a period of time that can work for you.
For me personally, I'd like to do another workshop first before we,
okay.
Soon follow up.
That's fair.
yeah.
Okay.
Could I throw one more thing on there of a request list? The current fiscal year budget.
We're still within any deadline?
Well, the 90 days would be April 1st, but given the circumstances, is this one of those that both parties agree that we
Well,
would
we get
extend it?
ask Mr. Schmidt right here, do you have any objection to us potentially going past the 90-day time period for approving the renewal application or declining it in order to get this additional information?
I have no objection.
Okay.
And could you also bring back how many students you have actually that are Lake County versus Marion County?
Yeah.
And have y'all had, just to throw this out as not part of this, but have you had any thoughts about, is it 2021 when you'll take ownership of your teachers. Is that the right, Dave?
No, we're a standalone charter.
Oh, you are
We're not a
standalone.
conversion.
Oh, you're not a conversion. We just lease the building to you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, they're not our employees.
Got it.
All right, any other questions?
Stephanie, do you feel like that's enough of the curriculum?
I want to see the revised plan. I think once they give us some stuff back, we can. Thank you. Yep, I'm good.
I mean, it would almost be nice if we got it ahead of time, the submittal.
curriculum
Then we could review and send back and let you guys respond.
That would
So
be
it's
fantastic.
So it's a much more productive dialogue, I think.
Yes, I would love that.
What did you say?
If they put together and we get it in your hands, and then if you have questions,
Get back to him.
get it back to them.
Okay.
So they can respond and be a little better prepared to speak to them.
Got it.
Thank you.
And since you talked about communication, when I came, one of the things that when I met with the charter principals was the lack of communication. And so one of the first actions that I did was put Ms. Summerlin over charters full-time. She had a number of things on her plate. We took a lot of those things off of her plate so that she could serve as a direct liaison with our charter schools and really help to enhance that communication flow. We did increase the site visits to be on an annual basis, and we did establish quarterly, I'll get it right in a minute, quarterly charter school meetings with all of the principals, and we just had one last week where we just have a time for open dialogue, any questions that they may have, as well as specific items, that information we need to provide to them, things that they want to provide back to us. And so those are some of the ways that we're helping to improve those communications with our charter schools. So.
I think that the way statute is designed actually increases the lack of communication, because if we get a call, and I haven't about an Altoona student, but if I get a call about an Altoona student, for example, I basically have to say, call your own charter board. I have no authority over you.
I have done that.
And so it creates a very odd disconnect, I think, just by nature of the way statute is designed. So you're basically on your own until it's up to us to renew you, so.
And we feel your pain about the finances. We know what you are going through. And being such a small school, it is harder. And I don't think it's our intent to do any harm to you, to try to help you any way we can. But bring some things to light, though, that needs to be taken care of, and bring it back to where it needs to be. Because I know Jerry Hatfield, whenever he started all these charter schools years ago, was very much into this. So, yeah. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to 3.02. I'm sorry.
Thank you all for being here.
Did you need a break?
No, I just wanted to ask one question. The safety and security, I noticed they weren't part of the committee that was doing the review. He just wasn't part of the committee, he did a report.
He did. I know he was on site. I know that they conducted the necessary drills, and he's provided them all of the safety and security information and whatever.
Okay, thanks.
There were no concerns in regards to safety and security.
But we were saying, I don't know what's true. We were saying, I'm looking at Chad. We were saying that they're volunteers. He's like, who is she pointing at? We were saying that their volunteers were not approved. The principal was saying that they were approved. I don't know what's true, but that is a safety and security problem.
Yeah, Mr. Farnsworth, would you be willing to address that? I'm sorry that they've left, but I think it's important for the board to understand kind of what the history was. That's been an ongoing dialogue. It was not something that was just brought to light. So.
I will tell you that we've been communicating back and forth with the school on this topic for a little while now. I think some of the tone of the responses we were getting was a little bit questionable as far as getting down to the real answers of how they're processing the volunteers. We have no record here at the district office that we process their level 1 or level 2 volunteers. So we asked how that was done. They thought that we were doing that and quoted a number. And no, we asked for documentation. They gave us a name. It was actually the name of an employee. Yes, we do process their employees. And so I think there was some confusion there, and they could not provide us with the documentation of how they are doing that. It's still not real clear yet on what type of documentation they're going to provide that they are clearing folks out there. According to them, they are clearing them somehow or another, but it is not through us. We do not do level 1, level 2 volunteers for any full-blood charter schools. We do for our conversions, but not those. So we're going to help them work through that. They need a policy, as it was notated there, and that way there is no question of how those are being processed, and it's something that we've been on top of trying to get worked out. So hopefully they'll have that issue worked out very, very soon, because it's not something that they can, that's probably the most important thing that happened that you see in that report, is making sure the people who are going on their campuses are cleared properly. So we are working with good communication with them. We're just struggling. They haven't been able to provide the evidence yet, so we're working towards a solution rather than continuing to dig for evidence. If they happen to find that, we know we expect to see it, but let's try and get a solution to the issue and assist them in that process.
Okay, so that's a big deal for me, so let's, yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Farnsworth.
Good morning. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
We're ready.
Great. Okay, we have our management team here this morning from CARE here, and I'd like to introduce them, and they'll provide you guys with an update on where we are with our health and wellness centers, and we'll be able to respond and answer any questions that you have. So we have Rick Hensley, who is our Senior Director of Operations. Donna Jeanette is our Director of Clinical Services, and Shannon Rollins is our Director of Health Initiatives. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members, superintendent. It's a privilege to be here today. We really count the partnership with Lake County Schools as one of our most important and critical relationships in the state of Florida. And we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to enhance that relationship, bring value to the school district, and provide services to your employees and the dependents. So we appreciate the opportunity to come and share some numbers with you, to make sure that you're comfortable with the services you're receiving, the value you're receiving, and get a little knowledge on some of the other enhancements that we've been working through and with your staff to add value to that. Just very quickly, a little bit about CARE Here. For those who don't know, CARE Here is a national organization out of Brentwood, Tennessee. We have over 200 health centers nationwide, serving over 350,000 patients a year, a little over 500,000 lab draws, and almost 750,000 meds, generic medications delivered through our health centers nationwide. So we appreciate that, and that brings a lot of infrastructure to the table. In addition to the team you see sitting here, we have an account executive that serves and supports this team, as well as a full-time pharmacy team that is always looking at the best value, the best marketing structure, what is necessary in the health centers, as well as the IT and all the other pieces that we bring to the table as an organization. So very quickly, we wanted to spend just a few minutes sharing some numbers with you, and then giving you plenty of opportunity to ask questions, make sure that you're comfortable, that you have a full picture of what CARE Here is doing for you and your organization. If you'll, I have to do this, don't I? There we go. I think if each of you have a packet that probably shows this a lot bigger for you. The first page is the financial report overview. And this period is for your last fiscal year. So that'd be October 1, 2017. July to June?
July 1 to June 30th.
Okay, excuse me, I'm sorry. July 1 to June 30th of last year. So, and we'll be back again this next year to give an updated report for the current fiscal year. But during this reporting period, we served an average of 4,892 employees. appointments per employee. When we look at employee, because our funding mechanism is based around the employee and that family unit, then each employee family that participated in the health center utilized the health center an average of 7.5 times during that year review. That may be the employee themselves, their spouse, or their children. So very high level of utilization, and that tells us that these people, your employees, see this as their primary care, and they're utilizing this facility to a great degree.
And is that higher compared to the other facilities you operate, the other 200?
It averages, it's probably right in the middle. We
Okay.
have some that are as high as 12, and some are as low as 4 or 5. You know, a lot of it depends on the size of the organization. Accessibility, with the 4 clinics, you do have a greater accessibility, so it's you're probably kind of in the upper middle.
What's the little number, the 3.8%?
That means that from the previous reporting period, that was up 3.8%.
Thank you.
Sorry, I should have
I didn't know if
pointed
that was
out to you.
national average
Right,
or.
yeah, no, that's just comparing this reporting period to the prior 12-month reporting period. And you will see that the average number of employees went down 1%, and that's pretty nominal from one year over the next. Total client cost of $4.3 million. That's
Oh, sorry.
I'm
Just
sorry.
real quick, is it an increase of 3.8% or was it previously 3.8%?
It's increased by 3.8%. Okay. Looking at the total client cost by month, you'll see that runs pretty static across the year. May looks real high. That's because of the 3 pay period month. So that's always about once or twice a year you'll have a spike in the overall cost because of the way payroll falls.
For your employees?
For our employees,
Okay. All right.
for the employees operate, we get paid every other Friday, bi-weekly. So a couple times a year you'll have a 3 pay period month, so that records a little higher than the rest of the months. To the right, the donut shows you the distribution of costs. You'll see that the program service fee is 31% of the total cost. That's what Care Here is paid to provide all the services and facilities and everything that we do operationally. The electronic medical report system, our team in Brentwood. Medical personnel costs, $1.6 million. Obviously, that's the providers and the ancillary staff total. Labs and supplies is in the pink, and then the blue, the light blue is medications. The important part that I want to share with you is just below that. When we look at health center visit cost, our data indicates that the average appointment per person is $60.96. Every time an appointment is made, the cost is $60.96. We compare that with the marketplace because that's the only thing we can, there are all sorts of other factors when you're dealing with your health plan and those factors. But all that we can compare is how much would this service have cost you if these services had gone to the marketplace. So we pull the data, the claims data from your carrier, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida, and we mine that data down to those codes. Everything has a CPT code. Everything's documented and tracked. We mine that data down to those primary codes that are used only for the primary care services that are provided in a typical doctor's office. We take those numbers, we create a per cost visit from that plan, and we compare that to what it actually costs to receive those same services within the Care Here Health Center that we provide to you. So you can see the comparison is for the Care Here facility, it's $60.96. The marketplace cost, again from the Blue Cross data, is $180.42. That's about a 3-to-1 return on investment. It's one of the better ones we've seen. And part of it is because of the high volume and the high utilization that we see in the health centers. There's very little lost opportunity with the 4 health centers that we operate on your behalf. How do we get that $60.96? We take the total medical personnel cost, that you'll see there in the next box, $45.92, and we add to that the lab supply and miscellaneous of $15.04, and you'll see that adds up to the $60.96. We don't include the third box, which is medications, averaging $10.78 per appointment, because you don't typically receive medications. If you go to the marketplace and are seen by your provider in the marketplace, you're not receiving the meds. You're having to go somewhere else, and that's an extra cost and expense. So when we look at that marketplace comparison, then we don't include those numbers as well. So if you look at the total bottom line in the boxes below, you'll see that we're showing a $4.3 million marketplace comparison savings. Our cost for just the claims is $2.2 million, and those same claims in the marketplace would have cost you $6.5 million. Does that make sense? Then where we say the summary savings, we know that we save you $4.3 million in the actual office visit and lab savings. We saved you another $168,000 in the cost of those meds that we're providing through the health center. And then we had a productivity cost. People tend to say it's not quite as important in the public sector as it is in manufacturing, where when somebody walks away from their widget machine, it's sitting there not making a product, so you're losing that productivity. I think it's just as important, because if you're losing an employee, whether that be a teacher, a mechanic, a bus driver, for a half a day, which is typically the minimum what it takes when someone leaves the workplace to go to the marketplace to receive their health care, you're losing that productivity. You're having to pay someone else to fill in a classroom, you have to pay somebody else. So I think it's a real expense, but they're still considered soft dollars. So if we look at that, and we look at based on the number of appointments that transpired in the health center, times, and we use a 3-hour savings at $15 an hour. That may be a little high, a little low, depending on your workforce. But we come up with those 3-hour savings. It's $45 per person. We say that there's an additional $1.6 million in productivity savings by having the convenience of on-site or near-site health care. And we feel like that's a factor that, again, even though it's soft dollars, it needs to be recognized, because that's part of the value that we believe that we're providing to you as an organization. Bottom left-hand corner, I just love this one, having worked in risk management for 30-some-odd years, and I was actually, my official title is raving fan, because I truly am a raving fan of Care Here. I was a client in Battle Creek, Michigan. We had a joint clinic with about 5 organizations, including the city and the county government and 2 or 3 other private employers. During a time where we couldn't get raises, we were taking stuff away from people, we were able to provide, kind of level the playing field. So if you look down in the bottom, the patient savings, your average employee saved $303 per year in out-of-pocket cost savings. I think that's significant. When we all know that I heard the numbers a while ago, 10,000 teachers shorter or something in the area. I know the medical field is dealing with the same thing. Anything we can do to help balance that and provide an out-of-pocket savings to our employees, to me, is very important and important to recognize. And then we finish the page off with a budget projection for next year. We're saying that due to the cost of personnel and medications, we'd be looking at just under a 3% increase. I think that's below marketplace a little bit, but we're like you. We have to remain competitive to maintain staff. I think in the last, well, I could probably know this better than me, we've only had 1 physician change in the last 3 to 5 years. Yes. And that was an addition of another provider down at the Tower Health Center. So very little turnover, and I think that's critical to the success of the health centers as well.
So if I could go back for a question here, the medical personnel cost increase this year, what's driving that? Is that the addition of a doctor there, or is that they're working longer hours, or
I think there's an
more
addition,
pay?
isn't it? Where is it?
Raises?
Raises, okay.
7% raises?
Well, it would have been 7% raises. Did we add hours, or?
Wow, that's nice.
We added a new position and the average staff raise.
Speak up so they can hear you. Talk to them.
We added 1 physician in October We interviewed him, and then he came on in January of last year. And then all of the staff has their annual merit increases of between 1% and 3%.
So it's a combination of adding.
And then the same thing
Everybody-
for the medical assistant, by the addition of the new facility, then you've added personnel.
Correct.
So how many physicians do we have and how many medical assistants do we have? Is that somewhere in the report, or?
It's not, go ahead.
It's
Donna.
not 6 physicians and 13 or 14 medical, it's a combination between medical assistants, LPNs, and we have 1 RN.
Have you ever done any sort of analysis on
And we also have an RT.
the jobs that might be able to be performed by medical assistants that we might be having physicians do because they're the labor that's there? Or
There's certain laws that mandate that we have to have a higher paid or a higher degree
Right.
in the medical offices.
Right.
So we have to have 1 LPN and or RN on site for each one of the offices.
Right. No, I'm not questioning that. I'm just wondering if some of the, you've got 1 doctor on each side or 2?
So Eustis has 2.
There's 4 sites, right?
There's 4 sites. Eustis has 2, Leesburg has 1, Claremont North has 1 4 days a week, and then 2 on the 5th day, and Citrus Tower is 2 4 days a week.
All right.
I think your question is looking at the possibility of mid-levels.
Like ARNPs.
And I think it's something we're having discussions with your administration. Because we haven't had any turnover, we haven't, unless we expand service hours, we have no place to create the opportunity for a mid-level relationship. We have a couple of things coming with retirements and stuff that we're looking at that possibility of doing that as a blended. I think there's been a hesitation to do that because I think when Care Here came on board in 2011, I think it was presented as a physician-driven operation, and so I think we've held real tight and strong to that. I think as cost becomes a greater factor and access to care becomes a greater factor, and quite frankly, the availability of MDDO providers, because the industry's losing 15,000 providers a year nationwide. So I think becoming more open to levels of care will become something that we have to consider.
How many MDDOs are you required by law to have for all 4 of your centers? Do you just have to have 4, or do you have to have 1 on site at all time, or is it 1 for all 4 of your centers? Because I know that there really only needs to be 1 doctor overseeing
Correct.
the
Yeah.
ARNP,
By
a nurse
law-
practitioner.
by law, we would only have to have 1 supervising physician for the entire operation.
For all 4 of them?
Right. By
Okay.
practice and by what was marketed to the school and the school board at that time was a provider-driven operation or healthcare center. So I do think that's something as we move forward that we will entertain looking at with your team.
But I thought Eustis did have a nurse practitioner there at one time.
Eustis did have a nurse practitioner a couple years ago, but then when she left us, they recruited for an MD.
Okay.
And that stems back to the physician-driven.
But that also requires a physician to be on site whenever that nurse practitioner's there?
No,
No?
it doesn't. No, the supervision can be remote, which we
Okay.
do quite a bit.
So what would be the cost differential, like, if we were to have all, let's say, 5 nurse practitioners versus, what is that
I
cost
think
differential?
you have to kind of balance it a little bit. I think it's not quite 2 to 1, but near that. I think the thing that you want to
So
be
about
careful-
500,000?
I mean.
2 to 1
you
what?
could- 2 to 1 for every provider, MDDO, you can get almost 2 mid-level, which will be nurse practitioners or physician's assistant. I think the concern you're going to have is you wouldn't want to go too far the other direction because I think you're going to lose part of your patient base because there's a large portion of the population, they only want to see an MD. They don't want to see a DO. They don't want to see, so I think you risk, if you don't have that balance, you're going to risk losing part of your utilization and part of your consistent care. So our goal would be to provide access to either option at any location, so that you have a full-time MD at every location, and then it's supplemented by mid-level as well. And
So
again,
what's the salary for an MD in this area?
ballpark, let's say 125 an hour. Don't hold me to this exact, because I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I can get them for you.
And then nurse
And then for
practitioner.
nurse practitioner, PA is somewhere around 65 to 70. So that's why I say not quite 2 to 1, but
So the 10% that we're going to expect to see an increase in medications next year, is that because we're expecting to dispense more medications, or are we expecting to see the cost of medicine rising, or is it a combination?
it's a combination of both. I have to say generics have started taking an upward turn in the last year, year and a half, so the majority of that would probably be increased cost of the same meds within the facility. It's really interesting. Medication is probably the biggest roller coaster ride you can get on, because one month you've got 5 vendors making a certain product, the next month you only have 4. Well, guess what? Those 4 say, oh, well, we can make up the difference because we're now a greater commodity. So you see that fluctuation month over month pretty regularly. And again, that's part of the reason we have a full-time pharmacy team that is monitoring this month over month over month to make sure that we're providing the right generic components in the health centers, that we're moving with the marketplace as it moves, and try to find the best priced option as we continue to provide those services. Good question, thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have a question, but first I want to understand the math.
Okay.
So I took your 4892
Mhm.
times 7.5, which is 36,690. And then our cost is 44,368,799. And I deducted the medications, which you said were not included in this $60 number, and I come to $119. So I need to understand the number first.
Well, you've got to find the appointment numbers, which the appointment number is on the next page. When we look at the cost per visit, you can't look at the average number of employees and the average number of visits per employee. You need to look at the next page, which says that we had 36,471 visits.
No.
So we take that total dollar figure and we divide that by the number of visits.
Okay, that's close enough to the number I came to, which came to 119. I came 36,690. You got 36,471. That's actually going to be more than.
You're saying the cost per visit
Is
for
it
us is
60?
$119.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
Okay. So,
Where did you get $60?
so $60 comes from where?
The $60, let me hover here on my page here.
And while you're studying that,
Yeah.
I want to go to Mrs. Cronin's concern, which is this, the intent was it would actually save money, and it hasn't. So what do you probably don't know exactly why, but give me an idea.
Well, I'm not sure if I understand how it's not saving you money. If it would have cost you $180 for the same service.
No, time out. I'm talking about overall, that our major medical costs continue to grow, and we're self-funded. And so you were to be a partner to keep that stable or reduce it, and that hasn't happened.
Okay. I can't account for what's happening in the rest of your plan. I do know that you've had some significant catastrophic claims that have impacted your plan year over year. Those are questions I would have to defer to your broker and to your risk management team because that's beyond our control. I mean, we engage, we try to direct care to the best source outside of the clinic or health center operation, but impacting the rest of the plan is something that we couldn't control. But what we're saying is that if we hadn't been here, your plan would have experienced an additional almost $4.5 million in cost.
Okay.
Do y'all do any sort of tracking on?
Can we verify the first number then, because that begins to
Yeah,
tell
let me
me.
see. Let me-
Now that tells me whether or not that's accurate.
Well,
Let me,
also,
let me track that.
we don't
here.
know if $180 is accurate either.
Right. I mean, when I go, I don't participate, so some of this is just green to me.
Sure.
But I have identically the same plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield, except I pay for it, I pay for my employees. That I know that when we go to the doctor, there's a copay of like $25, and it's like $50 total. So 50 plus 25, 75, not 180. So I'm a little, again, the numbers are just kind of throwing me off a little bit.
Well, are you paying for a fully insured plan for your employees?
I am.
And how much is your employee per year cost?
My It averages about $1,700 a month per employee.
Okay.
So I'm not saying like I'm positioned very well.
Right, yeah, no, I'm
You know
just
what
saying
I'm
that you've got to talk apples and apples, and when you look at the
Well,
total.
I just know that if you go to and you have a basic clinic visit, that it isn't, even not using insurance, it isn't $180.
Yeah, I had a question about that number too, because these aren't high-level appointments, right? These are 12-minute.
I see that, just so you guys know, I just looked at a statement from our pediatrician for a well visit, and it was like $200.
But a well visit's considered a high-level appointment, so.
Okay.
That's
That's the
a
only one I get,
different
like a
than
breakdown for.
I have a cold and I need,
Right,
Zyrtec
right.
or whatever.
You're saying
But I
that one
think-
doesn't
I
cost that
think
much.
you
Right.
have to- you have to
Those are
realize-
much more expensive appointments.
Yeah.
And you're looking at the
Realize that
negotiated
a lot of our
insurance rate.
appointments are considered high-level appointments because of the chronic disease management we are doing. So I don't think you could look at those. And that's why we take about 15 or 20 of the most common CPT codes that are used by, that we track, that are used by the marketplace. And that's why we take those codes and the cost from your claims data, and that's what we use to compare. Is it 100% exact? Maybe not 100%, but it's pretty darn accurate from group over group over group. And that's why we use that as a way to compare apples and apples, because there are a lot of other factors out there. I mean, we can't control if you have 20 or 30 people with, stage 3, stage 4 cancers. Those are going to drive huge claim costs that I know you're struggling with, that you're dealing with on a plan basis. We can't control that. What we can control is how much of your general population, for their general medical needs, their primary care needs, are coming in and experiencing this savings, both for you and for your employees, and how is that impacting the long-term cost of your plan? How much are you beating the trend line? We may not be able to keep you at zero, but has the amount of services being provided in here meant that your increases were 2 or 3% compared to 8 to 10% that the marketplace is seeing?
But I think that's our concern, is that we aren't beating trend. And we're not, I don't even know if we're not even making trend. So.
And we don't deal with those numbers. I mean, we're kind of on the,
Right.
kind of on the edge, and I know you've got a new broker that we're.
Can you
running
clarify
with.
for me, because I also have
Sure.
private
I just want-
insurance.
I'm sorry.
Are the majority of do you see majority well visits? Do you see majority sick visits? Is there, do you do well visits?
Do you want to?
Like, I need kind of an
We've got,
overview of
we've
what
got
the.
some, we've got some pages that talk about the types of visits. Do you mind holding that and let us talk through those and then come back to it?
Do you mind answering the $60 versus?
Yeah, let me,
I just want to answer that.
since I was talking, I didn't get a chance to run my numbers.
The formulas are here for how we got the marketplace.
Okay, so to get the marketplace cost, of course, he's wanting our cost. We recorded, we mined out the data, $1.7 million in primary care costs from your plan, and that represented 9,448 marketplace visits. And that's where we came up with the 180.
But to get that price, we first had to pay $1.3 million in program services.
Correct.
So really, that's part of the cost.
Right. And the reason, when we do this, we're trying to keep apples and apples. We're wanting to be able to show you exactly how much it costs for that care compared to the marketplace. We also know that you spend about $4 million in admin fee with Blue Cross Blue Shields. We'd have to factor that in to their cost per claim to adjust their 180. If you took that cost and adjusted their 180, it'd be probably $210 per visit. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand, but that's hypothetical. The truth is that, exactly to Mark's point, is within a doctor's visit, if I'm paying cash, I'm uninsured, and I go in and pay the doctor's visit of $180, that doctor has considered his overhead and all the other stuff.
Sure.
That you have to add to your 60, which I'm not even certain about that number yet, your overhead of 1.3, right? Million. I just don't think we're comparing apples to apples. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think it's apples to apples, but your argument is it's still cheaper.
Right.
Regardless of what the $60.96 number is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not cheaper if people are going because it's free, and they would ordinarily not even go see a doctor for a cold they have.
Well, we hope that they're going and being more compliant, and therefore remaining healthier and missing less work, addressing chronic diseases earlier on so that you don't have those high-cost claims a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. I haven't forgot your $60. I gotta get the numbers.
I'm gonna be quiet and let you keep going, because I'm sure.
My reports team creates the numbers, and I had to go figure out exactly where. Okay, while I'm looking at the numbers, if we may, to keep the meeting moving, I'd like to go through the health center overview and have Donna talk to you about the actual, what's going on in the clinics and what impact we're having on the employees. And I'll look at the numbers and get back with you.
Thank you.
Right there, health center overview, the one on the right.
For the last fiscal year, which was July to June, our overall utilization was 92.5%. That's inclusive of all 4 health centers. That's not a breakdown of individual health centers. We saw 36,471 appointments, which is an increase from the last fiscal year of 2.7%. 4,300 patients, and that we had about a 2.8% no-show rate. The breakdown in the appointment frequency, we saw 3,875 employees, 348 dependents, and 92 retirees. If you look in the center of the page where it says distribution of appointments, that breaks it down in percentages. The employees was 89.9% of the appointments. And then you have the 6.6 for dependents and the 3.5 for retirees. Our appointments by week and hour is there to the right. That breaks it down, appointments per hour, inclusive of all 4 health centers. On Mondays, we run about 94%, Tuesdays 93%, Wednesdays 92%, Thursdays 92%, and Fridays 93%. And Saturdays, we're running at about 87%. Our Saturday locations, we have 1 location open every Saturday. So they rotate Saturdays. So we don't have all 4 health centers open every Saturday.
Am I reading this right, that you're seeing 1,200 patients from 8 to 9? Roughly? 1,000 to 1,200?
Between the 4 centers?
So 300 people?
300 people an hour at each?
An hour?
That's over the course of a year.
Over the course of the year.
That's over the course of the year.
Okay.
That's over the course of the year.
Why don't people get sick on Saturday?
We're really busy. We're really busy that hour.
So, the one that stands out for me is Saturday. It seems like everybody only wants to go during the work time. I'm confused.
So, 2 of the health,
Right? Help me understand that.
2 of the health centers were open greater hours on Saturdays. We seen, when I became DCS a year ago, I evaluated the schedules inclusively of all 4 health centers. And I looked where we could utilize better, and we evaluated Saturdays specifically for the 2 Saturdays, or for the 2 centers that ran 6 hours versus 4 hours. So in October, I believe, we cut down the 2 6-hour health centers to 4 hours. So now our utilization is running at about 93%.
So we have two health centers open for 4 hours
We now
on
have,
Saturdays.
we now have all 4 health centers open 4 hours.
Does the employee
On
pay anything
Saturdays.
when they go to these clinics?
That's what you're.
No, right? No?
No.
Okay.
So,
Whatever
So
they
wait,
can
so
do
have
for
you
them.
fixed these low Saturday numbers? Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to follow.
Yes.
Okay.
so when you say you're running at 93% utilization, 93% of the available appointment slots are filled? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Can I just ask a sort of dumb question? How come utilization plus no-show doesn't add up to 100? Up at the top. Is that like
The appointments aren't scheduled.
administrative time or?
No, it's because people
appointments aren't
just didn't
scheduled.
make an appointment.
Right, they're not scheduled.
Correct. So you have some open spots. So
Oh, okay.
at some health centers, you may have 2 or 3 spots that are just not filled.
Okay, that's
And then if you have another health center that may have a spot that's not filled, also the patients have the availability to go onto our schedule because it's a live scheduler. So if, say, your appointment's at 11 o'clock and at 9 o'clock you know you're not going to be there, you can go in and cancel your appointment.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
That helps alleviate the no-show as well.
And they never pay, like this clinic, whenever the employees go, they don't pay for that service.
Well, now they have, the employees that have is it FSA?
Health savings.
The health savings account, they pay at the $25 payroll deduct for each of them medical visits. That they sign the form, it's sent over to Miss Marisol, and then it's payroll deducted from there.
So only if they have a health savings account. If they don't, then they pay it right then?
No.
We
They don't pay
collect
at all.
anything. They don't pay at all.
Anything the clinic can do for you there, as far as medical, you don't pay for under the, regular plan as an employee that has this coverage, or the dependent, it also is covered under the employee. So the employee is not out any money at the clinic.
Right, that's what I was trying to clarify.
No, the employees pay nothing.
But to the point, if you have a headache, you would go there, where normally you would sit back and take some aspirin.
Right.
So are we overusing, thus adding cost? If we had some stipend that you pay, you might at least think about, do I really need to go?
Well, where we were having a problem at in the past was not so much the care here being overused as the emergency centers were being overused. And people
Right.
were going there because they couldn't get into the care here or whatever. And that's where some of our cost of insurance and everything went up there,
Well,
because they were going to urgent care.
I know what
Right.
you're
Yeah,
talking about.
because if you tried to call your PCP, they'd say, I'll get you in 2 weeks, and you're like, well, I'm not gonna wait 2 weeks, so I'm gonna go to the urgent care.
Or
because
the
it-
ER.
Right,
Mhm.
and so then we get dinged there.
But now that there are more like urgent care, or
Right.
there's a lot more competition in that field, rather than going to the emergency room.
But you
Right.
have to pay for that anyway. I mean,
Urgent
I
care
took
is
Jace for the flu, and it was $50 right out the gate with
Yeah.
my insurance. I don't have this insurance, but
I know.
with my insurance. So there, if I'd taken him there as an employee here, then I wouldn't have had a cost,
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
except for the prescription.
Now, a few years ago,
Well, if it was something that we had in-house, no, you wouldn't pay for the prescription. We would dispense it to you at the time of your visit.
Right.
but flu, you have to go to the,
Tamiflu, we do not
Right, they
have
don't have that one.
in-house. Correct.
that's the one everybody wants.
Tamiflu,
Somebody
we
called
don't
me
have
about that one.
in-house.
So,
Yes.
so that's how I know.
Flu test?
We do.
They'll,
We do have in-house flu tests, so we can swab you. The test is about 15 minutes, but we can tell if you're positive for A or B.
and then you'd write the prescription, then they go fill that at their normal
Yes.
pharmacy.
And do you say don't go back to work? Is that a requirement when they come to there, that then they don't go back to work with the flu?
Well, if
Just
they have the
wondering.
flu, if they're contagious, no, we tell them not to go back to work.
Right. I'm just
Until they're
being
not
facetious.
contagious, just like strep throat.
Sure.
If someone is diagnosed with strep throat, you're contagious for 24
Right.
hours after you start your antibiotics. We don't want you to go back to school because now you've contaminated everybody that you've come in contact with.
Right.
So my question is about the no-shows. Have we seen that number decline over the last few years? Because I think the board put some sort of policy in there to collect if
Yes.
for habitual offenders. I see
Yes.
lots of nods, so that worked?
Yes, so the board policy went into effect February 22nd, 2016. Since then, or for 2016, the no-show was a little over 1,400 no-shows.
Holy cow.
And for 2018, it was below 1,000. I believe it was like 900 and something, just off the top of my
900
head.
people not showing up for an appointment.
Yes. And that happens a lot. We will also see a lot of patients will go on and, well, I think I can make this appointment, but I'm gonna make it here, and then I might make this appointment here, because I might be able to make it. And they will either forget to cancel that appointment, or then it becomes a no-show. The board's policy on no-shows is pretty lenient.
Maybe it's worth
It
tightening
is
up a
pretty,
little bit,
it is pretty
reviewing
lenient.
in
The
future meetings.
policy states that you have 30 minutes after your appointment to cancel it.
Okay, so after the appointment
Which, so
started.
you really, if you have a 20-minute appointment and you're 30 minutes late, they couldn't even squeeze you in Because I can tell you for the month of January, our utilization rate was at 97%. We were very busy for the month of January because there was a lot of sick patients. So we, since I became the director, I have tried to divert and re-educate the staff and the providers not to turn anybody away. It's not that we want to become a walk-in clinic, but if we can save the claims and if we can save them from going to the ER or to the urgent care, they're squeezing them in everywhere they can.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think that's a topic I'd like to revisit later, is to review the no-show policy. I mean, if we're seeing these expenses rise, we just can't afford people not showing up to appointments.
So for the no-show policy, I believe they have 30 minutes after their appointment to cancel their appointment, and they're not considered a no-show, which completely wastes that whole appointment spot.
That's right.
They get, the first one, they get a warning letter. The second one, that's a $25 no-show fee. The third one is a $60 no-show, and then the fourth one is suspension of the services for 6 months, but it's a 6-month rolling, is how the policy is written, I believe.
Okay, let's keep going, because this is
Okay.
quite a bit.
Sorry. So if we want to flip to the next page. The clinical overview. We have 48,920 individual diagnoses. We dispensed 28,968 medications, and we've done 19,860 labs. The breakdown of our diagnoses, 43% is chronic and 57% is acute. So that goes back to your question, Ms. Burns, about acute versus chronic. We see a lot of sick patients. Right next to that, we have our top 10 diagnoses, disorders of lipoprotein metabolism. That's high cholesterol. Allergic rhinitis, obesity, acute upper respiratory infections, high blood pressure, vitamin D deficiency, diabetes, depression, elevated blood sugar, and joint disorders.
So this is really a full, it's not really designed as a sick clinic. It's really
Full
a
service.
chronic, full service.
Yes.
That's truly our desire.
It's a wellness
We want
center.
to take care of the sickness, but we really want to keep well people well, and to deal with those chronic diseases and catching them earlier, helping them identify those risks and moving them towards that longer, healthier lifestyle. I mean, that's something we've become advocates of for many, many years. Dr. D. Eddington out of the University of Michigan, keeping the healthy people healthy is really the only way to win the game.
Down on the bottom left, you'll see the top 10 medications dispensed from the office. Cetirizine is the top one. That's for allergic rhinitis. Fluticasone, levothyroxine, ibuprofen, montelukast, atorvastatin, guaifenesin, lisinopril, ProAir, and vitamin D. The average cost per month per patient is $16.83, which breaks down to about 26 cents a day of therapeutic cost. Our top labs are HRAs, CBCs, A1Cs, vitamin Ds, urines, TSH, vitamin B12, a TSH and T4, B12 and folate, and a CRP. We're contracted with LabCorp at a significantly reduced rate. Our contract for an HRA at LabCorp is $5. An HRA consists of a CMP, a lipid profile, and a liver function test. It also throws in there your potassium, your magnesium, your sodium, your chloride, your BUN, your creatinine ratios. So what that breaks down to is for those tests to be run through a non-contracted Quest or LabCorp, those tests run about $1,200.
And the employee pays
All-inclusive.
nothing.
The employee pays nothing for us to draw the labs. If they was to go out, they would get their bill from Quest, and then it would go as a claim.
Our contracted rate is about $6 per HRA panel, so that entire panel costs $6 per test.
Pretty incredible deal. Especially when you see the value that it brings to the provider to have that full picture in front of them instead of just looking for CBC or this, vitamin deficiency. When you get that whole picture every time an employee comes in or a patient comes in, they can just serve so much better. It's really a It's probably the best deal. And I can guarantee you LabCorp won't make that deal with anybody else ever again, because it has grown much more than they ever thought it would 15 years ago when they agreed to it, so.
So I guess my question, and I was trying to wait because there is a significant portion of the presentation left, but my question is, so we heard, I think everybody got an email from a teacher, and I know it's just one account. I've heard a couple of other accounts just in regards to, we had this done, we had this done, we had this done within the clinic, but then they had to go outside the clinic, and it was, everything had to be redone, and then they actually found the cause, and it actually was, I mean, then you've got the cost of the clinic, and then the out-of-pocket cost for the provider. So what are you guys doing to ensure that these labs that you're running, that outside physicians, I don't know if you have control of that. I don't know how you monitor that. I don't know if this is a piece of everybody wants the insurance dollars, but how are we trying to protect our people from having to go outside and run these same exact tests again?
If we can do it in-house, we do it. If a patient, all of our providers follow best practice rules. So if a patient would not normally go into a health center and they come into the health center because they have a headache, unless it's substantial, our providers are not going to treat them out of best practice guidelines. They stick within best practice guidelines no matter what the diagnosis. So if we can do it in-house, we will do it in-house. If we can, at all expense, save on a claim, they will. But if you have a diagnosis that our providers can't treat, let's say you have RA. We've run all the tests that we know a rheumatologist would start with. We're going to send you to the rheumatologist with those tests. Then that rheumatologist is going to say, well, now I want this, 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 and this.
Right, but in some cases, they're making them redo all of the tests you've already done.
I don't think we can control that.
I know we don't. I just didn't know. So there's got to be a level of evaluation that you guys do to monitor. Like, are people coming back and you're getting the records back and you're saying they had to do it here and here, and then do you contact them? Is
Yes,
there a
and if we
partnership?
have those results that maybe the patient didn't have or that they didn't request from us at first, we will send those results before we just redraw something.
Right.
A patient is not gonna have an HRA done today and then another one done tomorrow because that lab's not gonna change.
Right.
However, a CBC would. An A1C would not, but a CBC would. So if you are on methotrexate and you have a chronic disease, they would theoretically draw you every other day and keep drawing you until your levels balanced out. Now, an A1C would be drawn every 3 months because that's an inclusive test of a 3-month time period. It's not gonna change overnight, so they're not gonna agree to order it, which on that side of the spectrum upsets the patients because the providers are refusing to have something redrawn because it would be an added expense when it's not medically necessary.
I hear what you're saying.
It's very difficult for us to control
I
what
know it is.
providers that are outside our circle.
We just want to avoid then the employee coming back and saying that this outside provider said that our care here clinics are not valid clinics, right? Because then they come back and say, we're paying for these services, but then when we go outside, they're saying they're going to redo everything because this level of service wasn't good. So we're just trying to avoid that. And I don't know if we come back to you and let you know who those providers are that are saying that about care. I don't know if we even can facilitate the beginning of that conversation, but we certainly want to avoid that kind of
And we do too.
unproductive.
I mean, you're never gonna get 100%.
Sure.
Because medicine is a practice.
Yep.
And there are different philosophies and different theories, and we feel like ours is very well-founded. We have 2 chief medical officers that review our providers on a regular, consistent basis to make sure that we are staying with best practices, that we are being both diligent with your resources as well as providing the highest level of care.
Yeah.
But you're always gonna get those few outliers.
Yeah, of course.
If you've only got 3 or 4 out of the volume we're accomplishing
Yeah.
on your behalf, it's probably pretty darn good, because, as they say, you give 10 people a $100 bill, one person's gonna complain because
Right.
it wasn't 2 $100 bills.
Right.
You're always gonna have that outlier, and we address those. We'll talk about that some more later if we have time, but we do address those and try to review them on a case-by-case basis to see if there's something we could do in addition to what we know. Any other questions on the clinical overview? Well, before we move on, let me eat a little crow here for a second. The lab and supply cost should have said 2606. Unfortunately, my report team's made an error there, so that would take the total up to, in my calculation, 7198. apologize for that.
And your cost of $71.98, that doesn't include the program services fee of the $1.3 million?
That doesn't count. This is just looking at that office.
What it
visit,
costs you.
Claim by claim. Well, actually, what it costs you.
Well, it
It
costs the $1.3 million to get that price.
It did.
So,
Right.
so that should be part of the overall number.
Right. When we're talking claims against claims, we don't include our overhead, the administrative fees that you pay us, which is all we get. There's no markup. Everything else is completely passed through. But we also don't, when we look at the 180, we also don't include the $4 million you're paying for the privilege of utilizing Blue Cross Blue Shields of Florida. Sorry, I said Michigan.
So someone who's uninsured isn't going to pay that overhead cost anyway, anytime. Just doing math. Right? Like the whole, if I come in and pay cash, I'm not paying Blue Cross's overhead fee, like you were saying.
Correct.
But they're not going to pay
Right.
anything because they don't have any
Yeah.
insurance, so they're not paying anybody's overhead.
You're paying the doctor's overhead. I mean, whatever that doctor can get as a fee for service for an uninsured party is what they're getting.
But the other thing that just glares at me, again, because I'm private sector, not participating in this, but ibuprofen, that's like Tylenol, right? So I took the 968 cases of you issuing Tylenol, basically, and that's like $68,000 that maybe we shouldn't be absorbing
Well,
with your doctor visit. In other words, they go to the doctor and you give them aspirin, basically. The other thing is, if we took just $25, that wouldn't be outrageous for a visit. That's $911,000 that we would generate in income. This is really for you. This is more for our conversation. And then you might be a little hesitant to go, if it's just free, in 10 seconds I'm gonna run down and get some aspirin. Come on.
I don't know.
we
that-
can,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we have a whole chart on this because this is a question that Lauren had asked us that we've been studying as well as to what items that have over the years moved from generic to over-the-counter and whether that's appropriate to continue to offer or not. I can tell you when we're doing occupational services and things like that, and again, for compliance issue, do you spend $1 for a bottle of Tylenol to get that person back to work, or ibuprofen to get back to work, rather than send them out to over-the-counter and the extra stop? So a lot of times in the past, the decision was made to keep some of those generics turned OTC on the shelf, just so that when the patient walks out the door, there's no excuse for them to not go straight back to work. But we have a sheet back here later if you want to wait and look at that in more detail, where we've actually gone in and looked at all those and compared the costs within the health center and the costs in the marketplace.
But the chances are, if I need some aspirin and I come visit you, if I had a headache, I could just go down to Walgreens, I'm back at work in 30 minutes, rather than make an appointment with you guys and the whole deal.
I agree. I would too.
But this doesn't mean that that's the only thing they
Correct.
dispense at that
Right.
time. So I
Correct.
walk in with a fever, I got the
No.
flu, they might give me some ibuprofen, but then they're also writing me the prescription for the flu.
And
I see.
also other, whatever you may need.
Yeah.
So if you need the inhaler because you have the flu and you're having
No,
difficulty breathing or
it would
whatnot.
be interesting to see the breakdown of when the aspirin was prescribed, because that's what I was thinking. When Jace goes in with the flu with 104-degree temperature, they're running swabs, but they're giving him, what have you given him? And we're going to give him the other right now while you're in this
Right,
office.
and see,
Not that
we
I didn't do it
can't-
already, but that his fever's so high,
Right,
they're
and see, we
rotating
can't
that.
open our bottles to give to you without dispensing to you. So
Yeah.
whatever we use for you, you get to take home,
Oh,
because we are not a retail, we are a dispensing,
so you give him
so,
the whole bottle?
yes.
You buy small bottles, right?
Yeah, we get it in, the smallest you can get is 30 quantities, so that's what we get it
Look
in.
at Oxycontin.
No, we have no
Tylenol,
narcotics.
ibuprofen every day?
Yeah, we don't have any narcotics.
Got it.
And cetrazine is,
Cetirizine?
it's Claritin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And fluticasone is, Flonase.
Yes.
So, like, these are things, like, we might wanna have a conversation between us and with our unions, like, what would be a reasonable, $5, and we give you, because, those can be expensive over the counter, but they're also really common over the counter, like.
My understanding, though, that they get a very good discount on that Flonase.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's to the tune of $62,000.
Yeah, if you look at that chart that's further back in the back, that shows that breakdown. of the
If you go
OTCs.
to, yes, this one right here that says Lake County Schools OTCs, I have it broke down. So this is what we have in-house that is also over the counter.
And if you look at it from left to right, you're seeing the care here costs and utilizations, and then from right to left is, we've got pricing from Walgreens, which is convenient. And there are a couple of them that we've identified we do pay a little bit more. When you look at sodium chloride and you look at ibuprofen, we are paying a little bit more. But when you look at the grand scheme of $5,700, if it's causing them to be compliant and they're going back to work with what they need coming out of the health center.
And also, what you get over the counter is not equivalent to some of what we have in the office. So in office, we have ibuprofen 600. So if you bought it over the counter, it only comes in 200. So you'd essentially have to take 3 pills. So if you break that down, it would be 30 cents a pill versus what we pay of 24 cents. Naproxen is the same way. Naproxen only comes in 220 milligrams. Ours is 500 milligrams. We also have ibuprofen 800 milligrams, and we have both of them in 30 and 100 quantity.
Is
So
this everything we carry?
no, that's OTC.
This is just the over-the-counter, things that we've identified that may have been generic at the time we started serving you, and
have now
somewhere
become
along the way have
over-the-counter.
become OTC.
So then the question is, do we charge
Right.
our people your cost? You know, so that there is some ownership without the $500,000 that we're paying, like the district's paying. Do we pass that?
If it decreases the cost of the services, right? So I think that's the big way in here is that we know that our people are already paying for this in our insurance costs. So we don't want to charge them again when they go into this clinic, even if it's just $5 for a bottle of ibuprofen, if they're already consuming the cost for the program. So I think we've got to look real carefully before we start charging them when they go to the clinic to what they're paying overhead for the clinics and make sure that that's going to provide a savings for the employee.
When you look at the OTCs, if you look at line 3, which is the care here cost,
Just looking at the clinic, just looking at the
for
overall.
calendar year 2018, the total cost of those items that could be purchased over the counter was $62,000.
And do you mark that up when you charge us? So we pay
No,
that?
there's no more.
Okay.
We truly,
Well, I'm just asking. He marks up everything. How much do your pots and pans cost? You mark them up.
yeah, if we pay a nickel for something, that's what we charge them. I mean,
So the
there's zero markup.
$487,000 cost is minus the 62 for the over-the-counter stuff.
I'm sorry, do
So,
what now?
so 487 minus the 62,000 is the cost of our prescription, our things that are not over the counter, basically, right?
Number would be in.
She's saying yes.
Yes.
I'm following the logic.
Yes, yes. So you take your total pharmacy number, what they could have bought over the counter
Oh.
is the 62 if you separate, yes.
Oh, I see, okay. I'm with you, I made that leap.
It wasn't that,
It was
I
a
wasn't
big-
going that far. Right.
Any other questions on the clinical overview? Again, we feel like it's a great benefit to your employees. We know that between your budget concerns and your growth, there's a need for expanded services later in the day, increase in accessibility, and we'll work with your team when the time's right to bring those opportunities on board. I wanted to move very quickly into wellness because I know the time is moving very quickly, but we feel like it's very critical that we share with you some of the outcomes because it's more than just financial. There's a population health management issue here that will impact your workforce, your longevity of your employees. So I'm going to turn it over to Shannon real quick and let her share some of the highlights of some of the things we've accomplished.
Thank you. Yes, we have a team of health coaches that are assigned to your group, so that's actually included into the program service fees. And with the health coaches, you'll see on the wellness overview page, which is on the right side, we had 460 patients that were engaged with health coaching for the last fiscal year. And then we break that down to total contacts as well. So what you'll see on the wellness team contact types, there's different ways that our health coaches and our providers engage from a wellness standpoint. So emails, that is our health coaching's either emailing documents for health education purposes. For example, if someone's diagnosed with diabetes, they have a follow-up appointment with a health coach, then they can ask for that further documentation that a health coach is speaking to in phone calls. We have, just to break down, telephonic health coaching available. We also have Doris. She's our on-site health coach. She comes on-site to every health center. She does come out monthly. So we do have a handful of patients who like to only see face-to-face health coaching, and then we also have patients who just want telephonic. So we had 305 unique patients who engaged in the telephonic health coaching, and then we had a total of 73 that engaged with Doris on the face-to-face health coaching. What you'll see is for the clinical provider piece, that's whenever someone is coming in, they might be diagnosed with something for the first time, and the provider sitting them down, going over that education with them as well. It's not only our health coaches that are educating, but if we have an individual patient who's diagnosed, say, with high cholesterol for the first time, it's also the provider's responsibility to sit them down, educate them on it, and then say, would you like further health coaching to help you get to your health goals? We also provide on-site health education platform through our EMR system. It's called Care Here Connect. We have certain wellness plans of care that our providers assign them through Care Here Connect. And you'll see the breakdown. I'll go over that shortly. But they're able to go online, and it just has educational videos that they can watch and educational flyers. And then from there, they can also connect with health coaching from that standpoint. You'll see down here with the contact type comparison, we did do a breakdown of 2015 to now with the comparisons, and right now we are working on increasing these numbers further as well. We find great value if someone, many studies show that if someone is continually working with a health coach or an individual or medical professional over time, they'll be more likely to reach their health goals. And then you'll see the wellness care plans that were assigned a breakdown, which I will get into our biometrics, so to speak, the school board's report card when it comes to the health of the population. But you'll see it does coincide with the wellness plans of care that are assigned. You'll see that weight is number 1, followed by diabetes. We do offer a no-cost diabetes supply program. Any individual who's diagnosed or has diabetes already and knows it are able to receive those supplies in the health center as long as they're engaged with health coaching and compliant working with a health coach. So if they're setting and meeting 2 goals, and they're doing annual touch points, and they're able to receive those supplies, which include test strips, lancets, and that really, really helps improve compliance as well, and individuals continuing to test themselves so they don't turn into a catastrophic claim in the future. Any questions about this page?
How do we increase it?
So I will say that with all of our groups,
How, like, your patients are 9.4%. Are they only diabetics? So that's the percent of people in America with diabetes, which is ironic that it's the same number. But like,
no, so when we do the breakdown of at the top, are you speaking to the patient, the 460? So I will say with many of our groups that have incentives, they have a much, much higher number for health coaching. It could be a number of things from the patient might not be ready to engage yet, they might not be ready for a change, or they might not think that they need it. So we really go in and re-educate the providers. From that vantage point, we'll go in and re-educate the providers, and then also an incentive does help. But really, no, the physicians,
Okay.
Yep. So we'll go in. So some examples, we have some groups that will provide either gift cards or premium deduction. And they receive those funds from wellness dollars through, for example, Florida Blue. So depending on if you were to receive wellness dollars on the health plan, then you'd be able to put that towards an incentive, and you'll see a significant rise in biometric participation and health coaching if that was something that was included within. So it's the HRA summary. It's the 28 panel when you go in and get a blood draw. And then they do a wellness questionnaire as well. Yeah, so just one example. We have one group who comes in and they'll have, as the voluntary incentive, if you do an HRA, so the biometric screening with the questionnaire, and a follow-up appointment with the provider. The follow-up is always just so important because that's when the provider does the education and can assign them to wellness. And then they know the results. Someone could go get a biometric screening and leave and never know that they have diabetes. So we always want them to come back in so we can tell them. And then if they engage in health coaching, then they get HRA funds. And those HRA funds that they receive are from the wellness dollars from the health plan. So depending on renegotiation of contracts in the health plan in the future, that could definitely be a game changer when we're looking at participation rates.
Excuse me, what was that, HRA, what does that mean?
Health reimbursement, I'm sorry, I'm used, okay, we call it a HRA as well, so that's just our health risk assessment, which includes the biometric screening, and then the health reimbursement account funds, that's also HRA. I'm gonna call it biometrics moving forward, so they don't get confused, but yeah, if they are receive those health reimbursement account funds, other options are lower cost options, gift card drawings. I know that is something that's been done in the past, just a couple gift card drawings, so that might help drive participation. In addition to, the Care Here team has been in discussion of trying to plan and brainstorm for the following year doing on-site biometric screenings, which could help as well.
Like, that's a major way you get, that you get healthcare dollars down is by actually dealing with real, like, obesity, your diabetes. Those are problems that just continue to get worse and are very expensive when you're losing legs and kidneys.
And yeah, and I'll even get into, on the next page, our potential savings. I'll get into that in a moment as well. So our HRA summary page, Rick, if you could move forward, please. Sure. Thank you. Thank you. So our HRA summary page, this is the report card, so to speak, of what the health of the population looks like. The one thing I want to point out here is at the top, you'll see the employee participation is 42%. So there's that extra percentage that we don't really know what the health looks like. That could be an individual who's never had their blood work done, never gone to the doctor. So we really want to focus on increasing that number. And then you'll see also the total health risk assessments were 2,279. So when you looked here at the biometric summary, when we are doing a biometric blood panel, we really measure 9 risk factors. So you'll see right under the HRA biometric summary, the 9 risk factors are measured there. The only one that is subjective is tobacco, because we only do the questionnaire for tobacco. We do have some groups who do either cotinine or nicotine testing, just based on if they're a smoke-free campus or whatever the case is. But what you'll see is those 42% of the employee population, the red is high, blue is borderline, and green is normal. So what we really focus on is those individuals who have abnormal lab values, is really encouraging them to engage in wellness, or if they want to make lifestyle changes on their own, partnering with the provider, doing that as well. And then you'll see on the bottom left-hand corner, it does do a comparison of the prior health risk assessment participation versus current. So it has been pretty much the same. I believe the year prior was when they did do the gift card drawings. So we'd want to look into possibly being a little more creative since it did stay about the same when we did those drawings.
You want a sure bet. You want to know that you're going to walk away with something.
Absolutely.
You know,
you want a little more skin in the game, when,
That's right.
so to speak, when someone's, if there's a 1 in 10 chance of of you getting something, you're less likely to go in than if you're guaranteed to get something for it.
Okay, can you help me with the people who have an A1C? Because that's like a marker for diabetes, right?
Yes.
So like, do we have 1,800 people that have diabetes or that were tested?
1,859 people who were tested.
Tested,
for-
and then 10% of them have it?
But what that meant is because of the serum, the glucose level, we don't do an A1C on everyone, but those who had elevated glucose, then we do the A1C on them. And what that means is that they have a risk factor, that their A1C is high enough that they're moving towards being classified as diabetic. If you have two A1Cs in a row that goes above that level, you're now considered diabetic. And these are people who, for the first time, were identified as being as they say, borderline diabetic. They're moving in that direction.
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have half of our population. It's not 1,800 people that actually have diabetes.
No, no.
That was what I was.
And then when you look at the health risk conditions discovered, that's 741 unique patients. Those are the unique patients who have come in to the first time to the health center and been told that they have some type of abnormal lab value. So with diabetes, I'll just give the diabetes as an example. There was 183, we call these instances, because one patient could come in and be diagnosed with, 4 out of 5 of these or 3 out of 5 of these. So according to the National Institute of Health, to manage a diabetic on the health plan costs about $10,000 or so, $683. So those are the potential savings that we're catching them through the lab values when they're coming into the health center, so they can start controlling from that standpoint, controlling and lowering their A1C and really, focusing on healthy eating and exercise, everything that it takes to be healthier.
So when we look at those numbers, we see the potential for saving almost $5 million over a 1 year of your plan costs. If we can get all those people compliant, deal with those chronic diseases, keep them healthy, that's the potential savings or cost avoidance, if you would, that we could recognize.
And rather than giving a gift card, couldn't we require the employees to go through this?
By the EEOC, you're not able to make it a requirement. We'd have to mark it as a voluntary program.
But if we were going to discuss charging a office visit fee, if you went through the program, it could be waived though, right?
Yes, we could structure it into that aspect of doing a reverse.
There's a number of things you
It's
could
better
do.
than a gift card.
There's a number of things you could do with plan design change, which, I know you've got a relatively new broker dealing with your insurances, and those are conversations that I'm assuming are going on between risk management and your new broker to see how you could better position yourself to provide the highest level of care and at the same time manage those costs.
Yeah, I think anything we could do to encourage this would be both cost-effective and just morally correct. I'd like our people to be less sick.
Great, so moving on to the risk movement page. This is my favorite page of the entire report. This is showing the health of the population, how it's improving or how it's not improving. So we'll take a look here. Out of the 1,492 health risk assessments, this report is showing those individuals who have had HRA year over year over year. So what we did was we took these same exact individuals, paired them with their blood work from 2017 and compared them to 2018. So 85% of these participants maintained or decreased their risk factors. I will say these are really great results. Care Here's best practices are to shoot above 70%. So our CMOs are very pleased with this number, so to speak. And also when we're looking at the risk movement, it does show the breakdown here of all the risk factors again. The two that I want to point out that make me very excited are the glucose and also the blood pressure. Really great movement there. And then when we're breaking it down below that, you'll see the at-risk participants. Those are the people. So above that chart is just talking about risk factors alone. below are the participants. So you'll see on this chart, at the top, you see where it says 987,654. So those represent risk factors. So let's just take a look at 9 for a moment. So 29 individuals in 2017 had all 9 risk factors. They all used tobacco, all had abnormal triglycerides, total cholesterol, blood pressure. Now this year, only 2 of them have 9 risk factors. Prior year, 70 individuals had 8 risk factors. This year, only 12. And then prior year, 134 individuals had 7 risk factors. Now only 57 have current. So what we really want to do is when you focus on just the blue on the chart, you want to see that risk movement move to the left-hand side. And we get many questions like, well, how come it's spiking then in the 3 risk factors? Well, that's because the people on the end had to go somewhere. So we're always wanting to see that movement come to the left side. You'll just see it sliced a little differently at the bottom on the risk index. Those are the number of individuals who had prior risk and current risk. So just some things to point out. A1C, 690 people with prior risk, now 501 have current risk. So that's where you really see that improvement. The example, I always use diabetes as an example just because it's an excellent example that they're coming in, they're managing, and then it's down to a manageable level.
We're not doing much about weight, though.
Well, weight is, when we look at best practices, weight is the hardest needle to move. And the reason for that is because it's a waterfall effect and all of them really play off of each other. But that is a portion of it as well. And that is something that over time, you'll see it move, but it takes a while. It really does.
It'd be the most roller coaster of the 9 risk factors.
Absolutely.
We all tend to rise and fall when it comes to BMI.
Any questions about risk movement or the biometrics of the population? Okay.
So there are some other things that we've added to our services during the life of our relationship. And these are above and beyond what we typically do in the primary care health center environment. So we wanted to share some of those because we don't feel like this has been acknowledged probably as clearly as we could. So I'm going to turn it back to Donna and let her talk through some of the stuff that she and her team have been doing for several years now and the impact it's had.
So we now do the occupational urine drug screens. We do the pre-hire drug testing. May, June, July, August, and September, I'm here on site doing them at the orientations. The rest of the year, they come to the health center. Over the course of 2018, we done 1,156 instant drug tests. So that's where you get the result right then and there on the spot.
You're doing the urine test right here while people are during orientation?
That's why the bathrooms are.
That's why the bathrooms in the hallway are on lockdown, and there's a
So
staff.
just one person at a time can go in?
Oh,
Correct.
It seems like,
Oh, yeah.
So, no.
I got good pee, I can fill up some
So
jar.
we empty out the bathroom, we follow the FDOT rules, empty out the bathroom, tape the things down,
Okay.
block everything off. We do the random, or the instant drug testing here. We get the results instantly, so they're handed over to Human Resources before we leave, unless they come back non-negative and we have to send it out. So for 2018, we done 1,156 drug tests, the instance, at a cost of $22,310. Now, I compared them with the urgent cares that are here local and Concentra Urgent Care, which is the former U.S. HealthWorks. Urgent Care for Mount Dora and Leesburg, the Central Care, do not do the instant drug testing. Concentra Urgent Care is the only one that does it, and they charge $67.50 for the drug test. For Care Here to do it, all inclusive of the test, the staff fee is $19.30 for the test. So it's a net savings of $55,000. The split tests that we do are for the randoms. Those are for the bus drivers and the white fleet drivers. They come in, there's a certain quota that has to be met every year. So we test 25% UDS, 25% every month. And that is on a surprise date. The staff, the bus drivers, the white fleet drivers do not know when the testing is. Their route manager notifies them that day. They come into the health center, they do an FDOT split drug test. We've done 91 of them for 2018 at a cost of $13.55. At urgent care and Concentra urgent care, they both charge the same price, it's $91. So it would have cost $82 or $8,281 through urgent care and Concentra urgent care at a net savings of $6,926. We do a lot of drug tests.
But that one there, though, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought, though, new employees, anytime we did drug testing or the fingerprint, they paid for. So that technically is a savings, but then it's not a savings. Are the employees paying for the cost of care here doing it?
They're saying that the employee would have to go pay.
Correct.
I know, but are we charging,
Drastically slow processing.
are
So what
we,
does the new employee pay for a pre-hire urine drug screen?
We just increased it because our cost increased. It was $8, we were paying $8 something per test, but the supplier increased the cost to what it is now, so we increased the cost to the employees.
Also acceptable, I think.
Yes.
We were paying $8, this says $19.30.
I know.
That was before.
It went up.
So the employee
It
pays
doubled?
$19.30?
The test kit itself used to be $8.50. The supplier increased their price to $15. So the $19.30 is also with the ancillary staff included.
And so we charge them
We charge the employee $19.30.
$19.30 or
I
20
think
or?
we bumped it to 20
Okay,
to cover that.
okay.
So, but if the employee had to go to urgent care or Concentra urgent care, they would pay.
Right, right.
So this is a plastic jar and a
Yeah, those things are
little strip?
expensive.
Sounds
Well,
like a new
no,
business venture.
actually, our cups are, the cup has,
The same concept.
Same
it
concept.
It went
is,
from
it's the same
$8 to
concept.
$15.
Yes, because they don't do the little strips anymore. It's something that's inside wrapped around in the cup. So it can't be taken out or modified in any way.
And would y'all typically be shopping this?
We
Since
do.
you're-
We do.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
that's the cheapest P thing you can get?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, can I speak real quickly to the occupational costs, because I know Kim had brought this up. And so what we've been doing, because we have the bus driver annual physicals that are also performed at the health and wellness centers, the pre-hire drug tests and the random drug testing. Donna provides a report, we do it like every 6 months, we'll calculate all of the costs, and then we provide that documentation to finance to transfer the funds over to reimburse the health insurance fund. So to address that concern of we're paying out of the health insurance fund for things that shouldn't be paid for out of the health insurance fund. So we reimburse that. Okay. Thank you.
So at the Claremont North location on Highway 27, we have in-house x-rays. I've done a 2017 and a 2018 cost comparison. How the marketplace fee, we took the claims data that was given to us. They done an average of not individual x-rays, but all-inclusive x-rays. They added it up, divided it, and got an average cost of what the x-rays would cost in the marketplace. So that's how we done the comparison. So in 2017, in-house x-rays cost $6,346. We are contracted with 2 facilities, Acumen and SimonMed. If they would have went out to a contracted facility, it would have cost $15,312. And if they would have went out to the marketplace, it would have cost $48,000. 2018, in-house x-rays cost $7,204. The in-house x-ray costs on average of about $13 an x-ray.
I'm just confused. Are these, I mean, are we just doing less x-rays?
What we're doing,
Is this, are these numbers the same number, like somehow? Are we just doing less x-rays?
We're actually
The marketing?
increasing.
I'm
She's-
confused how she
She's
did this.
comparing it to the market.
That's
She's
what the
saying the
marketplace
same
costs.
number.
Oh,
in-
So
if they did this, if they did the
Correct.
If you went
So
to,
Yeah, for
in
the same.
2017, there was 476 x-rays done
Okay.
at the cost of $6,346. If they would have went to a contracted facility, it would have cost $15,000. And if they would have went to outside,
Use the
Claremont
plan.
Radiology or the ER or urgent care or something like that, it would have been $48,000.
All right, I got it. Thank you.
So for 2018, we've done 551 in-house x-rays at a cost of $7,204. The contracted price for a contracted facility would have been $17,700, and the marketplace would have been $55,000. We are really pushing for the patients to go to Claremont North. Some of them give a little rebuttal about having to drive to Claremont North. I have broke it down mileage-wise for them, because when you think of Claremont, they're thinking of downtown Claremont. They're not thinking that it's right there, essentially almost on the corner of Highway 27 and 19. So it's 15.78 miles from Eustis, 12-point-something miles from Leesburg, and it's only 8 miles from Citrus Tower.
Isn't that Groveland?
Technically, it's Claremont.
We should consider a new name for that.
Yeah, it's a
facility.
Groveland location.
Yeah,
Well, but then
technically
they're
it
gonna
is
think it's-
Claremont.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the Groveland Police Department do sit out front.
Cloveland.
So the next slide is the contracted radiology cost comparisons for 2018. We done the same analysis. We took the marketplace charges, added them and divided and got an average cost.
Where do you get the marketplace charges from?
The claims data that is
From
submitted to
Blue
us.
Cross.
From Blue Cross.
Your claims data.
This is our claim, so our
Your claim,
Your
yeah.
claim
own
data.
Yeah.
Got
claim
it.
percentage.
So, okay.
so outside of your group, we spent another 700,000?
No. Mm-mm.
That's what it would have cost.
If that's what it would have
For the-
cost
These
you.
would have cost that much.
That's why I was having trouble with the other
But
chart.
how do you know,
Because we ran your claims data. that
and we
was
have some
submitted to
people
us.
that have gone outside.
Right.
Yes,
So that's where you got the
Yeah.
code and the
Yes.
pricing. And then you just multiply it times your number.
yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, for the contracted price, because we are contracted with Simon Med, and we are also contracted with Advanced Imaging. The contracted price for a CT, a DEXA, a duplex scan, an echo, the echograph, mammogram, MRIs, ultrasounds, and x-rays. The total contracted price was $463,706.28. If they would have went to the marketplace, it would have cost $761,000. So that is a complete net savings of $297,788.49.
Questions on that?
Well, and I'll be honest, I really work diligently with Simon Med and Advanced and Acumen to make sure that they are giving us a significant reduced rate. And Rick and I work hard at making sure that they are not overcharging. And I will tell you that when those invoices come in, I go through every invoice, line by line, patient by patient, and I go into every EMR. Make sure that that referral was ordered by our physician and that they are not overcharging us, because I know most of the contracted prices, because I've been doing it so long, and making sure that that price is right. And I have everything, any error that has incurred on the invoice, I have it removed before I even submit it for payment.
The next slide is the OTC slide we looked at earlier. If you have any questions on that, let Nolan will take action or address as you guys see the opportunity or the need. We wanted to just very briefly mention some of the other items and components that we've started addressing or presenting to your team as potential opportunities for other cost avoidances. We have been looking, we have a data analytics tool that is being implemented that gives us greater detail of claims called Springbuck that allows us to seek gaps in care where things are going out to the marketplace that we could recommend other opportunities for the cost avoidance. But some of the items that we're looking at is ElectRx. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a Canadian pharmaceutical provider that does mail order direct to your patients, your employees, significant cost savings. They have a component that includes insulin and those kind of demands. So that's one of the items we're looking at. We've implemented our own telemedicine program that actually works within our EMR that we're looking at, where if we could get a deeper reach into your population, where you guys are growing quicker than the health center locations can grow, is there an opportunity for us to reach deeper to your population through a very effective telemedicine program where they may come to the health center once, but then there's some follow-up things they can actually do by telemedicine, pharmacy refills, some of those things like that. So that's an option we're looking at. We're looking at virtual clinics where we may not have a need to build a brick and mortar new location, but there might be the opportunity within a school or a location site that we could actually bring a nurse on site with high definition equipment and actually have remote access to a provider to utilize that time without the additional expense of a full health center. We have a number of clients. I have several school districts along the Gulf Coast where most of their stuff is over here inland, and then they have little pockets of schools right along the Keys that it's just impossible for those employees to get there. So to have that virtual opportunity will help expand that. Pediatric services, we know that that's a very specific discipline that we're looking at opportunities to bring a pediatrician on site if the volume, if the population would warrant it. Orthopedic services, how much cost savings could we help you incur by having some of the initial visits, maybe go to a surgery center for the actual performance of the needed service, and then back to our locations for the follow-up to reduce that time and cost outside of our system. On-site dental, we're working with a couple groups to actually bring dental services on site, especially where we have adequate space to set up a dental lab within the health centers. And then sleep study services. I know something was mentioned earlier. A former vendor we were using turned out to be a degrading product that we recommended, and the school discontinued. We have a new company that we've been working with for about 2 years that does everything that we had anticipated the other vendor would do for us in the school. And so that's just another service that we haven't taken action on, but we do encourage reviewing it because sleep apnea is a huge issue in the U.S. population, and anything we can do to help manage that is something that should be considered in our mind.
And it's a huge issue with passing the bus drivers on their DOT physicals, because it's actually written in the NRCME mandate that if you're over.
Can you speak to that more?
The NRCME mandate? Or
Yeah, I
the-
don't understand.
Oh, the FDOT, which is the Federal Department of Transportation, has a book that basically says if you're over a certain age, or you're over a certain weight, or if you smoke, or you have a family history of, and they have all these criterias, that if you have these criterias, then you have to have this test done.
You had to have a sleep apnea test?
Certain criterias, yes. So if you are over 35 and your BMI is over a certain amount, you have to have a sleep study test done.
In order to be a bus driver?
In order to get your certification passed, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And that's not the physicians, that's the Federal Department of Transportation. So yes, they're really strict
That's for all
guidelines.
CDL, so.
That's all CDLs.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's not
And
just bus
it's
drivers.
yearly, I think she said?
So it depends. It depends on the patient, and it depends on if they have improved their obesity, if they quit smoking, if they have been compliant and they've reduced their risk factors, then no, it doesn't have to be yearly. It's usually every 2 years unless you fall into a specific guidelines. Diabetics, they have their own set of criteria. High blood pressure has their own set of criteria. Heart disease has their own set of criteria.
And the idea is basically so that they don't fall asleep while driving, right?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll continue to study those opportunities with your team. Time keeps marching on. The annual report we just did for you is somewhat dated now because it was from 6 months ago. Moving into 2019, our utilization and access continues to grow. You see, looking at the previous calendar year, we were averaging overall 91.2%. In the first month of 2019, that's sitting at 97.6, which tells us we are at capacity, and we need to do some adjustments to be able to continue to meet the needs of the employees and their families. This just gives you a breakdown of that same data in more detail by day of the week and hour of the day. And breaks you down even further by location. And this is looking at 2018, the last 3 months of 2018 compared to the first month of 2019, just so you, probably more data than you want, but we wanted to share it with you. And then appointment frequency, we still continue to have a great mix of utilization. Over 1,179 employees use the clinic, the health centers during the month of January. No-show rate still sitting at about 2%, so that's manageable. We always want to do better, but it's manageable. And this is our new patient satisfaction survey. We implemented over the last few months an automated survey system. We all hate surveys. We get surveyed to death. We begged, borrowed, and pleaded for people to do them while they're on site. We've done quarterly emails. We now have a system in place that within 4 hours of having your visit, you get a questionnaire either by text message or email, depending on how you had your appointment set up, to be a reminder. That goes out to them. And it's 4 questions, and it's what we call the Net Promoter Score. And it's something that a lot of industries are using now, just a quick snapshot to say, how are we doing? And we ask 4 questions. Would you recommend us to your family or friends? Is care here your first stop? How would you rate in those following areas, which are the convenience factors? And so far for the first month of the year, we had over 300 responses, which is pretty incredible swing from what we were getting. And we've been a Net Promoter Score of 84, so that's pretty solid. Just 1 or 2 ratings below a 6. 9 and 10 we consider promoters. 6 through 8 we consider neutral, and then below that we consider those detractors. Anytime someone submits a survey, and of course the last question, I don't have it on there, I'm sorry, the last question is just a narrative, if you want to give us detail what your problem was. But anytime we get a detractor, Don and I get an immediate email that tells us what that detractor was, and it gives us the opportunity to identify what the issue was, if we can identify, if they've identified a specific provider that they had a problem with, if they had certain things going on, and we can kind of identify who that was, we can take immediate action to improve the process. Oftentimes in the past, we wouldn't know a problem existed till 3 or 4 or 5 months later when at an insurance committee meeting, somebody said, hey, this is a problem. And by that time, so much water's gone under the bridge, it's hard to be effective. And so we're excited about this, and we hope that you and your employees continue to utilize it and give us the feedback, because we truly want to be your partner. We want to do what's right for you and your employees and their families. And we feel like this is a great leap forward for us to be able to do that and be reactive.
I just want to make note on your no-show policy, because I know it's something that you were going to look at. So when the patient makes an appointment, they get an email reminder. There's also an option for them to set up to get a text reminder, and then the staff calls the appointments for the next day. So they essentially get 3 reminders before that appointment.
A whole lot of excuses.
And then they have access to the schedule because it's a live scheduler. So they can go in and cancel their own appointments.
So we've covered a lot of ground this morning. Hopefully it was useful to you. Hopefully it was helpful. We're available for questions at any time. If you think of something, if you look through this and something else jumps up, please reach out to Lauren, and we're available to her anytime, any day, anywhere. And again, being the raving fan, I just love what I see going on here. I think it's making a huge impact, and everything we can do to enhance that and make it even more valuable, that's our goal.
Donna.
Ma'am.
you're most sort of on the ground, with your feet on the ground. What would you change? What could we do to make it better?
It also saves money.
Yes.
Patient compliance,
Patient compliance.
patient compliance.
How do we, is there anything we can do to
So,
policy?
Mr. Matthias was talking about maybe charging them unless they become participants or something like that. There's a lot of patients that will come in and they're not as compliant as they should be. If the provider pushes them too much, they file a complaint. They call the union rep or whomever, and then Lauren gets it, and then I get it. So it does its evil circle, but if a patient comes in and the provider says, you need A, B, and C, and the patient looks at the provider and says, I'm not doing that. This is what I want from you. Don't talk to me about anything else. We've had that issue. We have issues where patients will come in and demand certain things and get very angry because the provider's not going to go against best practice. So I don't know if maybe you could help with compliance, but I think that would be a significant something to look at.
So the other piece of this is, okay, so if some of our costs rise with you, then on the flip side, we hope that those are declining out in the marketplace, right? So
That's the idea.
right. So that being said, one of the questions I kind of mentioned earlier, somebody called me about Tamiflu, right? You all don't dispense that.
We do not.
So-
We only dispense generics in the health center because our pharmacy team, we have a pharmacy team that evaluates and negotiates prices at the cheapest rates every month. So if something goes up, let's just use Tamiflu. If Tamiflu was to become generic and we could get it in office, but if it goes up with this manufacturer this month, but it's down with this manufacturer next month, they're going with this manufacturer. So we only use in-house generics. We don't prescribe any non-generic medications.
And the problem is that for the name brands, there's little or no saving for us. And because you're passing the saving on to the employee by using us, it doesn't make sense to bring some of those things into the health center.
But you would prescribe if they needed that.
We would,
Yes.
oh, yeah, we do all the
They
time.
would
If
prescribe.
they
We do all
had
the
to
time.
have it, and it's not something that we could
Then
supplement,
they go to CVS.
then they would go to CVS.
And they pay their copay and get
Yes.
get the prescription
Yes.
there. But it comes with a high marketplace cost.
Correct.
So the question was, are there other, but you've already exhausted your list of medications that you could bring in-house that.
That are on generics,
So,
yes.
But that's always
But does it
changing.
increase
It's
compliance?
changing.
But our employees don't pay a copay at
No.
the clinic.
Not at the clinic, no. But when they go buy their prescription, that
They do pay a copay.
that copay.
That's what I'm saying, there's an expectation of paying something for your medical, just like if you don't pay anything. And I think getting ahead of the game is more important with lifestyle changes. But if it's not mandatory, then, and they have no skin in the game, then they're just gonna do what they wanna do, right? Because you see the obesity number I looked at, it didn't change much at all, which is you're saying you're fat, but you're not doing anything about it, right? Although the healthy consultant part didn't. Healthy eating didn't seem to mix with that, but that's neither here nor there.
I guess you gotta try and balance
Like
the.
they had one person that said, okay, I will eat better. But I think we need a serious conversation about skin in the game.
Well, and that being said, I think you also have to then create the balance as to what makes this enticing for people to go to versus then going to.
Their own doctor.
Right, because if I'm going to go to my own doctor, if I'm going to pay for the medication either way, what's my incentive to go here versus just go to my own doctor, which is going to have a higher cost for us if they do that. If they're not coming to the care here,
So
right?
does anyone, pretty much everybody that's on the program, they also have a primary care doctor outside of this?
Yes.
Or no?
Some yes,
Yes
some no.
and no. A lot of patients use us as their primary doctors,
That's what I was wondering.
and then others use us in conjunction with. So if you've seen your primary care doctor for 20 years, you don't want to leave them, you're now only going to go see them once a year, but you're going to use care here for the rest of the time.
Like if you catch a cold.
Correct. Or need something
We
else.
see about 80% of our patients, after 2 years of us being in place, consider Care Here their primary care
Yes.
provider.
That's what it would seem to me.
The only kickback is if you have to go to the hospital, Care Here cannot do anything for you
Correct.
there. You have to have a doctor either at the hospital will take care of you, or you have to have your own primary care doctor.
But your primary care, if you're going to the hospital, probably has gone a little above his ability.
Yeah, but he's a contact person as far as your history and things of that nature there.
Care here would be the.
Well, we can do that too. We don't have hospital privileges,
Right.
but.
There's a lot of doctors that don't have
But
hospital.
a lot of our physicians have that hospital
I mean,
list
there's-
that they work with one-on-one, so they report back and forth to each other. That's gotten a lot better.
Pretty much every hospital now has a group of
Hospitalist.
hospitalists
Yes.
that kind of monitor that, and I would say fewer and fewer primary care providers are going into the hospital environment. They've got that hospitalist on speed dial when their patients are going to that level, except when you get into some of the specialists.
Right.
I want to thank y'all for coming. This was
Well,
a
thank
very
you.
good presentation.
And I will tell you that I attend your job fairs. We sponsor for the job fairs as well. And I will tell you that I hear a lot at the job fairs when I'm there. Care here is one of the reasons they come to work for Lake County Schools. They may not have they may not make as much here, but they have greater benefits for Lake County Schools. And Care here is one of them. I hear that a lot. Kiana also reports that to me.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me, because it's really cheap, like free.
Well, it's not immediate costs.
Right.
Again, thank you for letting us come and be a part of your workshop today. As I said up on the top, we really count it a privilege to be your partner, and we don't see ourselves as a vendor. We truly see ourselves as your partner to provide health care and wellness care for your employees. And whatever we can do working with your team to enhance that, that's our goal. As a former risk manager, everything's about making the numbers look good, both on the financial side as well as the well-being side. So.
You want to drop your overhead then, because our numbers don't look good. Parker.
We'll talk. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Lauren, though. Lauren, just like it was a few years ago when I came on the board, that our workman's comp was out of sight. And when we really drilled down, it was like 4 cases that threw everything out of whack. I keep hearing that we've had some catastrophic major medical. Is it possible to get what those numbers are, so we really have a sense about whether we've had these additional claims?
We can get a drill down, and that's, one of the things that.
That with these guys. but
Well, it's
I don't
one of the
think-
things that we're working with Shannon on is this software called Springbok, and we are like really close to implementation. The data feeds are already occurring, and once we are able to go live on that, it will take all of our Florida Blue claim data and our Care Here data, and we should be able to run reports, analytical reports, and determine the claim costs and really drill down on what diseases and maybe you can speak a little bit.
But I'm concerned that we've had to comment several times that we had these catastrophic claims. That seems like
Yes.
pretty, without going to this whole new computer program and all that stuff. I just want to
Right.
know what that amount is, that's all. Is that not available?
No, we can get you that. We can certainly get you that. And we do have stop-loss insurance coverage, and we have a certain number of claims every year that will hit that stop-loss attachment point where we will only owe the claims up to, I think, $325,000 per policy year, and then the stop-loss insurance will kick in on those. But there's a lot of claims that are $250,000, which is still, that's a catastrophic claim, but it's not reaching the attachment point.
And what Lauren is alluding to as well is that it will make it a lot easier once Springbok is implemented to easily pick those high-cost claimants, what the conditions are out, and so Care Here can start to monitor as well from that vantage point.
And what are you
as far
monitoring?
as-
I don't
So
understand.
a perfect example is we have some easy way to create focus groups. I'll be able to pick out the number, just one example. We have one group who has a particular number of individuals, which is a high number, who had not had their mammogram that year. So we had done a implementation in mammogram bus to come out, to come on site and do a mammo bus. But if there weren't a high number of individuals for that specific thing, then we wouldn't have recommended it.
So do people waive their HIPAA rights or something? Are you automatically in their HIPAA group? Because I'd be creeped out if like somebody was like, hello, you didn't get your mammogram.
We don't do it that way.
Things to look at.
So that information is not released, specific PHI information is not released, specifically the numbers are released, and it's not outreach what you're thinking about.
Okay.
It's outreach on, let's just have this mammo bus come on site, let's do some really high-level marketing and try to bring these people in more, or let's tie an incentive to it and bring these
We
people
have
in
this
more.
number of women employees
It's
and
not-
only this
yes.
percentage got a mammogram this year, so let's.
Yes.
Pull up to your house and start
that's
walking
it.
the floor.
We do the same for colonoscopies then? Is that something we can add? I don't know.
All right.
And if we identified 10 or 12 people who were on a very, very expensive cancer treatment drug that, we're talking $20,000, $30,000 a month. If we can identify those, then we can go out and look into the marketplace. Again, the Canadian meds, which to me is, unless this country changes its laws, to me, that's going to be the only way to beat those rising costs for those specialty meds. Is to go to the tier 1 countries where you know it's quality, you know it's under the same or sometimes more stringent control than the FDA, and say, we're going to partner with you and we're going to bring that in at a 50 or 60% cost savings. Those are the things that Springbuck will help us identify and work with your team to try to help find those ways to close those gaps.
I have one question and then I'll be done. I wanted to say I'm interested in the virtual care because like I get sinus infections and I don't need like a doctor to say like I've been through the whole rigmarole like 50 million times. So I think that would be really useful for teachers to save time. But whatever happened to like the Publix? It was brought up at some meeting that like instead of using you guys to contract for some of the less expensive drugs that we could work with Publix. Can you guys work with Publix? Somebody brought it up at like
free antibiotics.
Yeah, for like free antibiotics, free.
Lauren can speak to that because we just talked about this in the insurance committees.
Yes, one thing that our new broker, Gallagher, is working on for us and is managing our pharmacy costs, because that is having such a huge, horrible impact on our overall healthcare costs is the pharmaceuticals, because there's just so many high-cost drugs out there. So they have gone out and done a RFP for pharmacy benefit management. Currently, Florida Blue, there's a company called Highmark, and that's their go-to kind of partnership company for PBM, pharmacy benefit management. So Gallagher has gone out and they did the RFP, and they've come back with some other options that appear to represent some significant pharmaceutical savings. So that's something we're going to need to probably schedule another board workshop to present that to you, but the Insurance Advisory Committee has recommended that we proceed with pursuing a different PBM company. That may entail employees carrying two ID cards, one Florida Blue card for your health insurance and a separate pharmacy card.
But what part, we're not operating in silos though, what part do they
Yeah.
play if they have pharmacy, like if you have a bunch of Canadians coming down, then where does it play with
Well,
what
that
you're
is
doing?
one thing that we have looked at, was CARE here's been exploring the option of this Elect RX program that would represent a significant pharmaceutical savings, but it would be purchasing our drugs mail order. The employees would only be able to get those mail order from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and maybe Great Britain. But there's some risk factor there with FDA stuff. We're in Florida. You don't want stuff sitting in your mailbox all day long while you're at work. So I don't know, but there's also some regulatory concerns that we have about that. So we're looking at the other option that would be equal or greater savings, in my opinion.
So then would they stop filling prescriptions or
No.
writing them, or
No, it would not change that at all. We would still have the dispensaries for generic drugs at all of the wellness centers, and the providers would still write whatever prescriptions are necessary that they can't dispense on site. The employee would go to the drugstore of their choice, fill it, but it would be processed through not Florida Blue Highmark, but another pharmaceutical management company.
Okay, but so we feel like their dispensary is a good value.
Absolutely, we do.
Okay.
We do.
And what
All right.
we'll do is, and it's kind of why the ElectRx thing is on hold, we're waiting on the PBM carve-out to be done.
But it'd be
and
interesting to look at the numbers, though.
We'll
I
go back
wouldn't
and look
stop.
we'll go back and look at the new numbers once that's done. And if it's a good deal for the school, then we will encourage it. If it isn't, then we won't.
But isn't free from Publix better for us than free from you guys? Because then we're not paying for it from Publix. Yeah, we're paying for it from you guys. Why aren't we using Publix more?
Well, that's a good opportunity, and it's a good question. And we can go out there, and we should, and we will, go out and get the lists of who's got what free right now. And that is a moving target, though, because those drugs will change. It may be Walmart this month, it might be Publix next month. But we can.
Publix pretty, as a standard, usually has like antibiotics or whatever, because they'll go to Publix and you get it free. And, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to go get your other meds, but it's like little stuff.
Yeah, I think the reason that it probably wasn't pursued overly in the past is as we showed you on the OTC, you know, it's a pretty small percentage of the cost that would be applied to those free at Publix. Do you risk compliance by not having those available on site so the person walks out with it?
But the challenge is pennies make dollars, and next thing you know, you got $62,000 worth over the counter you've given out. That's the truth.
Right.
So,
And what's free this month might not be free next month.
very good.
It's not an indefinite free.
Very good presentation.
As I said, where for you, if you guys think this is the direction you want to go or want us to go, we'll be there 100% supporting it. Because I get a lot of my stuff from Publix, so I understand.
Thanks.
Thank you
Well,
for your
thank you
time.
again.
Thank you. All right. We're down to board member comments.
I'm good.
Well, I just wanted to give a shout out again to your Academic Services Unit. National History Day was this Saturday at the Lake County Museum, and it was amazing. So the students did well. The after-hours work that our departments do at the district level is phenomenal. Those people are just really going above and beyond. And when I was thinking about what I would say about that, I was thinking Steam Bowl is next week, which is another event that requires multiple outside hours. And then we had the spelling bee. What was that, last Friday or the Friday? Yeah, it was last Friday. And I wasn't able to attend, but I heard Dr. Burns did, and it was a fascinating event, as usual. So anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out to those ladies again, because it's that extra above and beyond that they're doing for our students this time of year. And this is a busy time of year anyway, because we're in the season of testing and school's in full swing. And boy, aren't we looking forward to spring break. So I just want to say thank you to those people. Thanks.
All right. Well, speaking of testing, I think one of the interesting things that has stood out in my mind as we kind of begin to follow what might unfold at the state level with education is if we're potentially looking at the repercussions of increased vouchers, then we have zero accountability on those students, and we as a taxpayer have no idea how those schools are performing or if they're even doing as good of a job or better or worse of a job than the student would have otherwise received in the traditional educational pathway. So I guess just as we're talking about having a level playing field, because I think that's been one of our points from a legislative platform stance, that we encourage, once again, the continued accountability of whatever school choice model gets put into place, so that way we can really see if students are getting a better deal or a better option somewhere else. Yeah, just because you spend public dollars doesn't call it public, right? I mean,
Yeah, I don't think we
ABC
need to
Christian School is still a
redefine
private school,
the word
even if you
public.
paid for it with public dollars. So
Yeah.
that's my take on that.
I'll pass today.
I just want to say thank you for filling in for me on the board meeting, and also staying through the whole spelling bee.
My pleasure.
I was there, but I left whenever I felt I needed to leave. And, but the kids were doing a great job and representing Lake County very well. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Superintendent.
Ms. Luke covered both of my items, so I'll just say ditto to what you said.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I was out last week, so I wasn't here when Judge Cemento issued an order in the City of Claremont case. I understand y'all know that that order was issued. The judge essentially found for Mrs. Page on all of the objections she raised, found that the city had not provided them adequate notice, had not entered sufficient evidence, it had not followed its own ordinance and what it had to produce at the hearing. So it looks like it's 30 days from the 25th to file an appeal from any ramifications that we might have as a result of this based on what the conditional use permit was for. The charter school that obviously is still looking for a place to have the school has a additional time period it can request to open the school next year. I have to double check, but I think that it has one more year of allowing for an extension to be requested that we would have to grant. And it's certainly between now and the time period when it has to notify us of the final location could transfer to a different piece of property. So either one of those two things could happen. One would result in potentially the school opening in the fall. The other one would be that it wouldn't open this fall. So that's where we are. Let you know what happens on the appeal.
All right. No further comments?